Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, August 17th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jean Guerrero, investigative reporter and author of Hatemonger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. Also on the program today, Pelosi calls Dems back for a postal hearing and to vote on a bill to prevent further changes in the Postal Service. Meanwhile, with the DNC opening tonight, it's Republican night. Joe Biden still leads, but polls close. Top DHS officials are serving illegally. The U.S. woefully behind other countries in a COVID response. Surprise, surprise. A private security firm is now housing migrant families in private facilities with no oversight. Trump ramping up the Somali airstrikes. Evictions loom as more than 1 million Californians are missing their unemployment insurance payments. And Belarus, rocked by massive protests against Lukashenko's dictatorship. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. That music, guys, when you play it, is so low. I can barely hear it.
Yeah, it was lower this time.
Was it lower? Okay. So it's not just me. I'm not just aging. Hey, folks, tonight the DNC launches, and we're not going to do a ton of coverage. For a host of reasons. And sadly, we're not going to be doing any coverage of the RNC. However, I've got good news for you. At 3 p.m. today, Eastern, Nomi is launching her 1-hour daily DNC special show. So at 3 p.m., you're done watching this one or listening to this one, check out Nomi's show, The Nomiki Show, on Patreon or patreon.com/The Nomiki Show or youtube.com/The Nomiki Show. Today, her special guest, she's got a bunch of a panel of folks, but her special guest is Thomas Frank. So check that out. You will not be disappointed. In fact, you'll be less disappointed with the coverage than you will be probably by the actual convention itself. But check that out, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can catch Nomi's show live on YouTube. Let's get into this. The major story, the Democrats are going to be coming back this week to pass legislation. I mean, of course, none of that's going to make a difference because I don't think Mitch McConnell's terribly interested in that legislation. But what it will do, what this is all about in many respects, is raising people's awareness about what Donald Trump is trying to do in terms of the election, raising people's awareness about the post office. Now, if we had the ability, let me put it this way, there's a great opportunity here to get people to appreciate not just the post office, but the entire dynamic of the post office. And it's not just the post office, it's the postal service. We had Mark Dimenstein on, I guess it was a week ago, who is the head of one of the postal carrier workers, letter deliverers unions. And he made a point of saying it was the postal service. It's not a postal business. The universality and just the entire dynamic of the postal service, that this is a service that is profit is not job number one. There is no profit to be made here. It is to provide people, regardless of whether they live in an area where it's easy to deliver mail or difficult to deliver mail, with the same service. To keep it available to everyone. The post office does things that no business would ever do because some things just aren't profitable. Frankly, it's a great model for what we should be doing with health insurance in this country. The health insurance industry makes a profit only by denying people coverage. That's their business model. Hopefully that dynamic gets communicated, at least by the left. You won't hear Nancy Pelosi talking about that, but that's the case. Meanwhile, here is Mark Meadows on, he was on Jake Tapper's this weekend. We will play more of the clips. He's denying that sorting machines are being decommissioned. There have been reports all around the country of voting machine sorting machines, mail sorting machines decommissioned. He is attempting to prevent people from voting. And here is Jake Tapper saying, "Why there's no proof of voting fraud when it comes to mail-in ballots." And here is Mark Meadows' brilliant retort.
Sure. Let me ask you a broader question about voting by mail. Sure. Your own folks at the White House vote by mail. President Trump and the First Lady, as you noted, requested mail-in ballots this week in Florida. Other White House officials, Vice President Pence, Kayleigh McEnany, Kellyanne Conway, a half dozen cabinet officials, all vote by mail. Can you tell me the difference between voting by mail in Florida and, say, voting by mail in Pennsylvania? What's the difference?
Here's the difference. I can't tell you about Pennsylvania because I don't know the difference there. All I do know is the governor of Pennsylvania is talking like he doesn't have any money to pay for enhanced unemployment and some of these other things when he's got $3.6 billion sitting in the bank. So that was a misnomer. But as we look at that, here's what I can tell you is absentee, no excuse, what I call no excuse absentee. Say, listen, I'm concerned because of the pandemic. Will you send me an absentee ballot that comes directly to me? I certify that. I have a signature requirement that makes sure that it's me that's actually voting, and I send it back. I don't have a problem with that. The president doesn't have a problem with that. What we do have a problem with, and what I have a problem with, because I don't want my vote or anyone else's to be disenfranchised, is to send millions of ballots across the country to sometimes empty mailboxes.
That's 9 states.
No, that's 9 states right now.
It's not across the country. It's
Well, Jake, you're talking about 9 states that do it now. What I'm saying is the problem that we have here is a lot of people are looking at just sending out ballots. California is sending out ballots, and when they just send out ballots, if my home state of North Carolina
already did California already did that for about 75% of its population.
I agree.
Now it's 100%.
Yeah,
but Utah has done it for years. Oregon has done it for years. Washington has done it for years. A lot of these states have done it for years. Nevada. Now there are 4 states that are adding to the sending out ballots to every registered voter. I understand that that's a concern that you're claiming. But when President Trump and the Trump campaign act as though...
Jake? Wouldn't it be a concern to you? Do you realize how inaccurate the voter rolls are with just people just moving around, not let alone the people that die off, but sending ballots out just based on a voter roll registration? Anytime you move, you'll change your driver's license, but you don't call up and say, hey, by the way,
there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud, though.
But
there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud.
There's no evidence that there's not either. That's the definition of fraud, Jay.
Whoa, there you go. There's no evidence that there's no evidence of fraud.
Wow, there's one for philosophy.
Actually, there is evidence that there's no evidence of fraud. It's just that the absence of evidence is itself a clue that there may be evidence. We could just play that last part about what he's saying there at the end, because I can't tell if he's just sort of saying, well, I mean, we don't know what we don't know. There could be fraud, even though there's no evidence of fraud.
Registration. Anytime you move, you'll change your driver's license, but you don't call up and say, hey,
no
by the way,
of widespread voter fraud, though. But there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud.
There's no evidence that there's not either. That's the definition of fraud, Jay.
No, there's evidence that there's not widespread voter fraud, and the evidence of there not being widespread voter fraud is the absence of evidence that there is. I mean, I have no evidence that says, Matt, you are not faking your identity to me. I don't have any evidence of that. I mean, I guess I have your social security number, but that's not, I have no evidence that that's not a fake social security number.
It's a catch me if you can.
That's pretty impressive. There's a lot of things that there's no evidence of that would substantiate that maybe there's evidence of it. That's what fraud is all about. There is no evidence of fraud. That's weird. I don't know how anybody ever gets convicted of fraud if there's no evidence. The fact is, there's no evidence of fraud. And that, in and of itself, is not evidence that there could be fraud.
Yeah, but isn't that what the fraudsters want you to think?
That is exactly what the fraudsters want. I mean, listen, think of it. There will be ballots sent out to places where people cannot are not eligible to vote. And when those votes get sent in, they will be discounted, assuming that they get sent in. Like, I don't know who's going into these mailboxes and sending out 2 ballots. You'd have to know that the people aren't around to go into the mailbox. It's absurd. It's absurd. Folks, do you have any idea, as you look at my clean-shaven face, how much you could save in 1 year by switching to Harry's? I do. Enough to buy 26 cups of coffee in New York City, or enough for 3 deep dish pizza dinners in Chicago. I don't know why anybody would get deep dish pizza, to be honest with you. Or enough to pay 6 months of your Netflix subscription. How? Harry's delivers high-quality razor blades as low as $2 each. That's a fraction of the price of leading brand and saving you hundreds of dollars over time. Now, it is true that I'm always looking to save a buck, but for me, Harry's is not just about the fact that you save cash. It's because it's super convenient. The blade refills are sent to me directly via schedule. I don't shave that much, so sometimes I build up a little bit of a backlog, and I'll suspend for a little bit. But the blades are super sharp. They have the smaller head, so I can maneuver around my asymmetrical nostrils. It also looks good. It's not all buffed out like those other razors. They also have all your other grooming needs covered too. Hair care, shower products on Harrys.com. Harry's is committed to providing premium products without breaking the bank. Plus, 1% of the proceeds are set aside for nonprofit organizations that help provide access to better mental health care for men and veterans. I've talked about Harry's. They've been one of our longest sponsors for a long time. I don't shave that often, but when I do, it's with my sweet, it's a little retro handle, Harry's. Listeners of the show can redeem their Harry's trial set. So you can try this out at harrys.com/majority report. You're going to get the weighted ergonomic handle for a firm grip. You're going to get the 5 blade razor with a lubricating strip and the trimmer blade. rich lathering shave gel with aloe to keep your skin hydrated, and a travel blade cover to keep your razor dry and easy to grab on the go. Go to harrys.com/majority report to start shaving and saving today. harrys.com/majority report. Check it out. Also, I've been talking a lot about Blinkist lately. Blinkist is the way that I keep in touch with books, nonfiction books that I feel like I should read, but I don't necessarily want to, or to figure out how I can be a better person without having to dedicate too much time to it. I mean, come on. Blinkist is unique and powerful. It works on your phone, your tablet, or your web browser. It takes the key insights from over 3,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories. It condenses them down into blinks. You can read or listen to these things in 15 minutes. And now Blinkist offers its members exclusive original podcasts from top authors and creative thinkers. You can also dive deeper into full-length nonfiction audiobooks at a special discounted price, Matlack. Over 14 million people use Blinkist to deepen their knowledge in topics spanning from self-improvement, management, happiness, and more. Like I say, I love Blinkist because it allows me to sort of know what's in certain books that I really don't want to dedicate a huge amount of time to. Like Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I don't want to get too deep into it. I just want to know the top. Give me the takeaways. Am I going to read something by Rick Wilson? Probably not, but I'm sort of curious what his attitude is. That's why I listened to Everything Trump Touches Dies. I'm still skeptical, but at least it only took me 15 minutes. That's the beauty of Blinkist. And right now, Blinkist has a special offer for just our audience. You go to Blinkist.com/majority report, you start your 7-day free trial, and then you get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership and up to 65% off audiobooks that you get to keep. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/majority report. Get 25% off a premium membership and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/majority report. Check it out. And lastly, as you know, if you're an employer, get a small business in particular, big business, I guess, too. I know small business, you got a lot on your plate. Now, always. If you got kids and now you got to deal with your schooling, you got to figure that out, and you got stuff on your plate. How am I going to deal with my business? ZipRecruiter can make your hiring process, at the very least, quick and painless. Story Cafe Altura's COO, Dylan Miskowitz. He agrees. He needed to hire a director of coffee for his organic coffee company, but he was having trouble finding qualified applicants. What did he do? He switched to ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. And in fact, I can tell you the story of Majority Report CEO Sam Cedar, who was having trouble finding a producer. And he went on there. He got a tremendous amount of qualified candidates. I interviewed, I think, probably maybe close to a half a dozen to a dozen people. I had them all within a couple of days, but I was scheduling out the interviews. I said, I'm going to leave it on for the next week and a half, even though I was getting so many candidates for this thing. And then late in the game, ZipRecruiter pulled in somebody named Brendan Finn. And now you know him as Brendan Finn on the Majority Report. Dylan did the same thing. He posted his job on ZipRecruiter, said he was impressed by how quickly he had great candidates apply. He also used ZipRecruiter's candidate rating feature to filter the applicants so he could focus on the most relevant ones. That was actually super helpful for me because I'm not that organized, and this made it super easy. And that's how Dylan found his new director of coffee in just a few days. Well, I don't know who that person is, but I'd put Brendan up against that new director of coffee in any day. With results like that, it's no wonder 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. See why ZipRecruiter is effective for business at all sizes. And like I said, the best time to look for new people to hire is when you don't need them. Try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority. MAJORITY. ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter. It's the smartest way to hire. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to be talking to Jean Guerrero. She has written a new book, Hatemonger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. It is it's a fascinating story about Stephen Miller, who is a very disturbing character in my estimation. We will be back in just a moment. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome investigative journalist Jean Guerrero on her latest book, Hatemonger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. Jean, welcome to the program.
Hi, Sam. Great to be here.
So, all right. I want to start. You spend a significant amount of time, maybe the bulk of your, I don't know the bulk, but the real emphasis on sort of Stephen Miller's development into the person that he is today. I want to just go backwards a little bit so that people get a sense of like where that ends up. So, sure. Because you, I know that you were reporting on the family separation, which I think is sort of like maybe a too kind of a way of expressing what was going on. Talk about Stephen Miller in the White House, what he is doing and how he has changed our immigration policy and immigration politics in many respects in this country.
Well, Stephen Miller is probably the most powerful advisor in the White House right now. He's in control not only of the immigration policy, but also Trump's rhetoric. He's one of Trump's top speechwriters and has been, from the days of the campaign. He has outlasted, many of his people like Steve Bannon and Jeff Sessions, who was his former boss when he was working in the Senate. And he's really just achieved this outsized influence. And what he's done for the most part is, he has completely transformed the immigration system where, the government is primarily targeting asylum seekers and refugees and other families who in most cases haven't broken any laws, with the exception being occasionally the misdemeanor of illegal entry. So before the Trump administration came in, there was really an emphasis on, felons, on criminals and cartels. And despite the rhetoric that you hear out of Trump, when you look at the man who is shaping his immigration policy, his focus is really on, targeting people fleeing violence and persecution, mostly from Central America, but also many countries in Africa. So we saw Stephen Miller, slash refugee admissions to new historic lows every year. We saw him completely obliterate the asylum system at the U.S.-Mexico border slowly to the point where now they're not accepting pretty much anyone. You saw him suspend green card access, really, again, targeting families. And when you look at why he's doing this, it becomes clear when you familiarize yourself with the white supremacist and white nationalist literature that he has been reading for many, many years. It becomes clear that Stephen Miller, his goal is to re-engineer the ethnic flows into this country to keep Black and brown families out. And he is focused on these areas like asylum and refugee admissions because that is where a majority of these families come in. And the other area I'll say, Stephen Miller is responsible for Trump's most incendiary rhetoric. When you hear things like far left fascism or unhinged left-wing mob, or when you hear these really gruesome descriptions of alleged migrant crimes, talking about migrants slaughtering little girls, or a migrant taking a hammer to crush a woman's eye socket or something like that. That's usually Stephen Miller. I mean, Stephen Miller has a real taste for the morbid and the incendiary, and so he's responsible for a lot of that rhetoric, which you see Trump using more and more of now during this time of crisis to kind of distract from his disastrous response to the coronavirus.
And we should say the rhetoric is in many respects doing to what happened to Miller to many other people in this country in terms of radicalizing them in this way. Let's talk a little bit. You finish towards the end of the book, you finished up with Katie McHugh. And this is how, in many respects, we know when you say he reads white nationalist literature, he reads white supremacist literature, he traffics it too, right? And so, I mean, just
exactly.
talk about that a little bit, because this is, I mean, the thing that I find fascinating about your book is that it really talks about the radicalization of basically a, I don't know, 13 to 16-year-old kid, boy, and it sticks essentially. Exactly. And, we talk about it happening to teens on this program, in many respects what we do, but this is, every now and then one of them ends up being the one of the most powerful people in the country. Talk about how Katie McHugh and how we know that he traffics in his stuff.
Yeah, so Katie McHugh is a writer. She used to be a writer at Breitbart, the right-wing website. And while she was a writer there, Stephen Miller was assigned to send her story pitches that she was expected to turn into articles. And you can see from emails that she shared with the Southern Poverty Law Center that for years, Stephen Miller was feeding her websites, white supremacist and white nationalist websites, and urging her to do stories about them. And she tells me that it really helped to radicalize her, in the alt-right white supremacist movement, which she eventually abandoned. But for a while, I mean, she says he was pumping her with articles about, painting Black and brown people as innately more violent than white people. So just constantly feeding her material about crimes committed by Black and brown people in a misleading way to try to create this impression in her mind that Americans face some kind of existential threat in the form of Black and brown people. And she eventually, leaves the movement, and she shares these hundreds of emails with the Southern Poverty Law Center, many of which I've seen. And you realize that he, he's very familiar and inspired by these white nationalists and white supremacist sources. And it's because, as you point out, and as I try to point out in my book, Stephen Miller himself was indoctrinated in these views at a very young age, in the same way that he indoctrinated Katie McHugh. I mean, when he was a teenager, his mentor, David Horowitz, tells me that he believes he exposed him to the website American Renaissance, which is one of these websites that he was sharing with Katie McHugh that pumps out misleading Black and brown crime statistics. And you see, and so from a very young age, I mean, Stephen Miller, he was going through a hard time in his life and feeling displaced. His family had to move from a very affluent part of Santa Monica, California, to a less affluent part because his father was struggling with his real estate company. He was tangled up in numerous legal disputes and bankruptcies related to his real estate company. And so Stephen Miller was he kind of fit the profile of someone, who would be radicalized. He was feeling lost. He was feeling displaced. He was feeling angry. And David Horowitz came in, as did other, far right radicals, came in during this period of his life and gave him a sense of purpose and a mission in life. And Horowitz, who is a former Marxist turned right-wing radical, introduced him to this fantasy that Stephen Miller had to save the United States from certain destruction in the form of the Democratic Party through its alliances with Muslims and other people who happen to always be people of color. And so Stephen Miller,
hold on. I want to just
consumed.
I want to back up. So let's go to sort of his origin story, because this is also very fascinating to me personally, just because I first came out to California for work from 95, and I was there through the end of the 90s, off and on, and in the first 4 or 5 years of the aughts, as it were, spending my time listening to right-wing talk radio as I was going from job to job. And so I'm very familiar with these guys that he was sort of bathing in at the time. And so just let's start with Prop 187, which happens in 94, because the other thing that I find fascinating about the story that you tell about Stephen Miller is that there is maybe a little bit of encouragement in that what California was going through from like the 90s into the first decade of the 21st century was sort of the shift that maybe the country as a whole is going through, in and of itself. And in my estimation, it works out okay in the end. But let's talk about Prop 187 and walk us through what's going on in California at that time and how he ends up finding David Horowitz, because there's an interim step, right? But talk about 187.
Exactly. Yes. So exactly. I mean, Prop 187 is just one of many anti-immigrant measures that were taken in California at the time. And, I really see Stephen Miller as being a product of this environment in which California was seeing unprecedented anti-immigrant hostility and was sort of a microcosm, as you point out, for what we're seeing nationally today. I mean, the Prop 187, Republicans and Democrats came together to, attack social services for undocumented migrants, including access to public schools for their children. This is something that was eventually found unconstitutional, because for a variety of reasons, one of which is the fact that, the children should not be punished for the crimes of their parents. And also just the fact that if you deprive children of access to public education, then, you foreclose any possibility that they might contribute in a positive way to our society. And so it's, bad for everybody. So there was Prop 187. There were also statewide attacks on bilingual education. There were statewide attacks on affirmative action. There were statewide attacks on the Spanish language and trying to make English the official language of California. And this was, you saw this across the state, and it was in part, Republican Governor Pete Wilson of California at the time. He was blaming all of the state's fiscal problems on migrants and, talking about the invasion at the border and running advertisements on television showing, families running across the border and with his ominous narration talking about how they keep coming. And so Stephen Miller, he was listening to this and he begins to internalize a lot of this rhetoric. And I remember, because I grew up in Southern California at the same time as Stephen Miller. I'm just a couple years younger and grew up a couple hours south of him in Santa Monica. And I remember, as the daughter of a Mexican immigrant and a Puerto Rican mother, I internalized this rhetoric as well. I remember there was a sense of shame associated with being Mexican, and people wanted to hide the fact that they were Mexican. And so to me, it's not really surprising at all that a young Stephen Miller internalized this and began to express, racist viewpoints at a very young age. The difference is that Stephen Miller sounds the same today as he did when he was 16. But you see him at school, breaking up with a Mexican friend because of his Latino heritage, telling him he can't be friends with someone who's Latino.
I found that striking. It was a guy named Jason Isles, and it's his buddy, and he's going to high school, and it's sort of like, I don't know. I feel like you could see this scene in a movie where it's like, the social climbing kid says to his friends, like, you guys in the, the chess club or whatever it is, you guys are nerds and I'm not hanging out with you anymore because I'm going to try and be, a big man on campus or whatever it is. Except for in this instance, he's saying it because of his Mexican heritage.
Exactly. They were friends. They used to talk on the phone frequently about, Star Trek, and they used to have lunch together and things like that. And then after a while, Stephen just kind of stopped calling and stopped returning his calls. And then one day he did call Jason Nislas up and said, I just can't be friends with you anymore because of your Latino heritage. And that this is just, one of the first instances that we see Stephen Miller beginning to really internalize this anti-immigrant, anti-Latino rhetoric. And it's partly, he was listening to Rush Limbaugh at the time. He was listening to this conservative talk show host named Larry Elder.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a second. Let me just ask you, because Larry Elder is a fascinating figure in my estimation. But do you think, because obviously his dad's going through some legal issues. We don't really know for sure, what the dynamic is going on in the home, right? But his parents were also his relationship to immigrants and immigrancy, I guess. Like, to what extent do you have? Is it in your feeling? Did he have that sort of same dynamic that you talk about with your mom, where they where he wanted to make sure that he was perceived as American? Then on some level, like, he had to go, if you in the wake of 9/11, every cab that you would get into that was driven by anyone of, like, whether they were from Pakistan, whether they were Sikh, just anybody who was not lily white, would put an American flag on there to sort of, because they felt like they had to sort of, protect themselves from what was happening in terms of, like, some of this backlash. On some level, like, psychologically, do you think that Miller was, felt like, I need to show my bona fides? I mean, did he have any, like, my bona fides that I'm so American that I'm going to, get as far away from my own personal, I guess, background as possible?
Yeah, from my conversations with people who knew him back then for the book, it's clear that he did, want to showcase an unusual amount of patriotism around this time. I mean, he writes about having visited Mexico and being very pleased with the fact that they listened to American music and wore American looking clothing, and he talks about, I mean, he doesn't renounce his Jewishness, but he talks about how how Jewish holidays are important to him, but more important to him are American holidays, because he says Jewish people are a minority, so Americanness is more important to me. So he really starts to identify with being American, and but for him, that manifests as identifying with whiteness, and I really do believe that he was internalizing that sense of shame with being other, having descended from Jewish refugees, and wanted to be seen as American with all of the privileges that is supposed to guarantee. And I remember this feeling myself, and so I can empathize with what Stephen Miller was going through at the time. But you saw him taking it to a whole other level. After the 9/11 attacks, he became very upset with the fact that his high school was not, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. He really wanted to show his patriotism by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. And this is when you see him, call into the Larry Elder show.
Now, Larry Elder, for people who don't know, is a Black conservative who I think is on after, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's on after Sean Hannity out there. And I should just say, because it makes this even more disturbing on some level, I sat down with Larry Elder in the 2004 Democratic National Convention with Jeanine Garofalo, and I were going around and talking to right-wing talk radio hosts as we were there for Air America. Larry Elder sat there, and Jeanine and I were a little bit contentious with this guy, and I certainly had been listening to him over the course of 4 or 5, maybe 10 years prior to that, and we were a little contentious, and he's like, "Come on, guys, let's leave it on the field." And we just looked at him like, "Are you serious?" And the idea that he had this type of impact, which I didn't know, obviously, on Stephen Miller, like his play acting, to a certain extent, I know that he has some beliefs, but his play acting, that it was just sort of like, part of the job, and let's take the uniforms off, when he is leading ultimately to, what we've seen with immigrants, is just sort of like, I don't know, it makes me nauseous on some level. But so he starts listening to Larry Elder, calls in enough that he becomes sort of like Larry Elder. Larry Elder's like, "Oh, I've got a 16-year-old who really sounds like a full-on, fascist in the making. I'm going to promote this guy," basically.
Yeah, I mean, Larry Elder tells me he was very impressed with how articulate Stephen Miller was for a teenager, and that he ultimately invited him onto the show a total of 69 times. And he was telling me about how impressed he was with just the way that Stephen Miller spoke, the way that Stephen Miller dressed, and he clearly had a huge impact on Stephen Miller, not only because he gave him a platform through which his voice was heard by a number of other leading conservative figures in Los Angeles at the time, such as, Steve Bannon and David Horowitz, but also, he wrote this book called 10 Things You Can't Say in America, which Stephen Miller read as a teenager and later cited it as one of his most formative books. And one of the things the book talks about is how, according to Larry Elder, systemic racism and institutional racism are fictions, at least when they come to people of color. The only real racism, according to Larry Elder, is, anti-white racism, that Black people are more racist than white people. And this idea really spoke to Stephen Miller and to many other people, who couldn't believe that there was, a Black man kind of providing them a framework to justify their racist beliefs. I mean, Larry Elder says that the problems of the Black community are a result of a problem of self-determination within the Black community, and not institutional or systemic issues. And as you might guess, I mean, these ideas are very popular among white conservatives who have racist beliefs about the Black and brown communities. And yeah, so Stephen Miller is on his show. He's complaining about his school's alleged lack of patriotism. He actually gets his school to start reciting the pledge because he shamed them on the Larry Elder show. And this gives Stephen a sense of power.
Right.
You see him from a very early age having an impact through the media, forcing institutions, in this case his school administration, to do things that he wanted them to do.
It is so sweet, this story of two people filled with self-loathing who come to find in each other a deep down friendship. So touching on some level. And this is where David Horowitz, who was, I think at this time, doing his college tour, claiming that we're now talking basically 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, like around then, right? Where Horowitz is going around claiming that and keeping the names of professors who are saying left-wing things in college, tracking them, has basically a clearinghouse think tank. I don't know if it was him and just a secretary or what, but they were really on the whole campus PC culture, right, at the time?
Exactly. Yeah. Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, David Horowitz was leading a campaign to defend white conservative college men who were in trouble due to allegations of racism or xenophobia or sexism. And really, characterizing these men as victims of discrimination based on their skin color. So completely inverting, the arguments of the civil rights movement and the arguments that are usually used by the left. He successfully, I mean, there was this one college in Cal State Northridge that a fraternity had been suspended because they had passed out flyers with referencing a very racist song about, a Mexican girl who's penetrated, just a terrible, disgusting song. And David Horowitz got some attorneys to put legal pressure on the school and reinstate the fraternity. So just that kind of thing. And he when he heard Stephen Miller on the radio, he saw, a kindred spirit, a gutsy. He told me he saw him as very gutsy and a potential recruit to his movement. And so coincidentally, as Horowitz is thinking this, Stephen Miller actually reaches out to David Horowitz because he heard about him through a conservative classmate. And Stephen Miller was always, as you can see, very, very skilled at networking. And so he reaches out, he invites him to speak at the school, at his high school. David Horowitz comes, he takes a real liking to Stephen Miller. He begins to, invite him over to his house and, have conversations with him and ultimately completely sets him up career-wise, gets him his first jobs in Congress, recruits him to lead this thing called the Terrorism Awareness Project that essentially just conflates all Muslims and all Arabs with terrorists. And even according to private correspondence that I obtained for the book, he was shaping Trump's rhetoric and Trump's policies through Stephen Miller throughout the campaign and possibly during his time in the administration as well. So this is a man, I mean, David Horowitz, like Larry Elder, he believes that anti-white racism is the only important racism, that, any claims of racism against minority communities are a figment of your imagination. And he introduced Stephen Miller also to this idea that, everything that we hold dear as Americans, things like liberty and equality, are a product of white men, which is ahistorical, obviously, because it ignores the central role of people of color throughout American history. But Stephen Miller was taken with this idea and began to believe that to be a patriot meant to, preserve the whiteness of this country.
I want people to really just focus in on this sort of the Horowitz thing is so important, because when Horowitz in the aughts, his whole project, I think, culminated in a book, and maybe it was like 2005 or somewhere around then, about that literally was a list of professors in universities that he felt were too left-wing, liberal maybe at the time is what he would say. And so the idea was like, there was too much PC happening. This is what the words they would use at the time. There was too much PC, all of which was the sort of public face of the white supremacy argument that they're making. And it has evolved. They now talk about it as cancel culture is the problem. And a guy who literally wrote a book saying, here's a list of professors who should be canceled at these universities. The only difference here is like sort of like just what the relative power dynamic is. The idea has been consistent throughout. It's just that it gets regurgitated and resold to the American public in different ways. And Stephen Miller was intricately involved in that. So talk about so you've got this alliance between, basically Horowitz becomes Miller's mentor in many respects. Larry Elder is sort of like the midwife for the mentoring. Where does Steve Bannon come in? I mean, what, and not just Breitbart, the organization, was there ever a relationship between Breitbart and Miller?
Yes.
Because they were cut from the very similar cloth, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, and I just want to say quickly to your argument about, Horowitz sort of having this double standard about cancellation. I mean, he told me that he was sharing his emails with me because he read an interview that I gave about how opposed I am to the concept of labeling people and reducing people to labels and putting them into boxes. And he said that made him trust that I would never dare to call him a hatemonger, call Stephen Miller a hatemonger, because he saw me as a reasonable person who never labels people, which is, it was just so strange, because all that David Horowitz does is label people and put people in boxes, call Democrats totalitarians, call Black Lives Matter a Nazi organization and terrorists. This is what he does. So it's just, these inversion arguments are really fascinating when you think about the deliberate psychological manipulation that's going on there.
Wait, let me ask you one more question about that. Do you think that he was sincere in that belief about you? He was wrong, I should say, apparently. But do you think that was it? Or do you think that he wants some credit?
Oh, I think that he wants credit. I mean, I would like to believe that it was some sincere belief of his, and I really don't know. But to me, I suspect that David Horowitz, he's approaching the end of his life, and he wants to be included in the record. And Steve Bannon has been so skilled at self-mythologizing and sort of exaggerating his role in the rise of Trump for so long, and David Horowitz has kind of lurked in the background, as has Stephen Miller. And this is part of why Stephen Miller has lasted so long in the White House, because he doesn't try to take credit for too much or even anything at all. But yeah, I mean, I suspect that David Horowitz was trying to correct the record there.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Now, all right. So let's talk Bannon. Let's talk Breitbart, not just the publication, but the guy. Yeah.
So Steve Bannon, he's called himself a Leninist before. He talks about how he wants to tear everything down. He was at the helm of Breitbart, this right-wing website, when Stephen Miller was working in Congress in the jobs that David Horowitz had gotten him. And at the time, Stephen Miller was kind of struggling to, get stories planted in the media. He would call up reporters at the Hill and, normal traditional publications, and they would just kind of roll their eyes at him. I mean, Stephen Miller was trying to, derail the nomination of Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, saying that her Latin American heritage made her incapable of objectivity, and people just ignored him. But
now he was with Sessions at that point, right?
Yes, he was working with Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions as his first as his press secretary, and then as his communications director.
We should say prior to that, he worked for Bachmann and for what's his face, the super conservative. I can't remember his name now, but he worked for Bachmann.
Oh, John
and then
Shadegg.
Yeah,
John Shadegg of Arizona.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and prior to that was with Michelle Bachmann, but he spends the majority of his time with Senator Jeff Sessions, and this is when he meets Steve Bannon, who remembers hearing his voice on the Larry Elder Show back in Los Angeles, and being really impressed with him, as so many people, so many conservatives listening were. And so he decides that he's going to give Stephen Miller, he and others at Breitbart decide to give Stephen Miller kind of free reign over the writers at Breitbart. And they tell the writers to take his story pitches very seriously and to, turn them into articles. And so you see Stephen Miller, this is when you see him feeding white nationalist and white supremacist literature. In particular, one that I found pretty illuminating is he tells them to write a story about parallels between real life and this book called The Camp of the Saints, which is a white supremacist, really horrific book about the destruction of the white world by brown refugees who are described in really degrading language, talked about as beasts and monsters and, sent as teeming ants toiling for the white man's comfort. And they're just depicted as incompatible with civilization and destroying Western civilization.
This was written by a far-right wing French author in like the early 70s, I think it was.
That's right. And it was translated to English in the United States by a man named John Tanton, who's a eugenicist who believed in population control for non-white people and believed in the genetic superiority of whites. So Stephen Miller reads this book. He loves it. He's inspired by it. He decides to get Breitbart to write an article about it, and they do. They paint the book as prophetic, saying that the immigration crisis at the border is going to lead to the destruction of civilization as we know it in the United States if we don't do something about it. And you also see Stephen Miller at this time derailing this historic bipartisan immigration compromise between four Democrats and four Republicans who are trying to, further militarize the border, but also provide a legal pathway for people already in the country illegally. And Stephen Miller completely derails the bill, smearing it through Breitbart as something that's going to decimate America, that the globalist elites are supporting because they want limitless cheap labor in the form of mass migration, completely, smearing and misleading information about the bill. Because, as you know, if you're trying to legitimize the workforce, you end up having to pay these people a more fair wage and there's less exploitation. But anyway, Stephen Miller succeeds in this, and this is one of his big wins. And this is around the time that the Republican Party was really moving towards being more inclusive and more diverse. They lost in 2012, and they, decided in their autopsy report that they were going to make a more concerted effort to appeal to minority communities, a real reckoning. And Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon have this meeting with Jeff Sessions, and where they talk about doing the opposite. They look at this analysis that shows that there was a missing white voter in the 2012 election, and they decide that they're going to make every effort possible to transform the Republican Party, not in a more inclusive and more diverse direction, but rather doubling and tripling down on this idea of appealing to the white working class specifically. And Horowitz also sends a strategy paper around this time telling them to make the Republican Party around demonization and inciting fear and other based emotions. So Stephen Miller runs with this, and then you see, Donald Trump announcing his candidacy, and Stephen Miller gets really excited. He thinks that this is the person who's going to be able to realize all of his dreams, and he starts to provide free labor for Trump, and eventually gets himself hired officially as senior policy advisor and top speechwriter.
I mean, in many respects, this is this feels like, you've written it's almost the secret history of how white nationalism got into the White House, because Stephen Miller has been maybe not, there's nobody been more durable and resilient in the Trump White House than Stephen Miller, right? There may be some that are equally, but I guess Trump's family members. But it seems to me like Stephen Miller has somehow managed to stay within favor with Donald Trump this entire time and continue to be sort of right there always, sort of almost like Trump always returns to Stephen Miller, it seems to me. Regardless of where, there are times his eyes wander to something that might be appealing to, non-racists, but ultimately always returns to Stephen Miller. Why is that?
Yeah, he is the only person outside of the president's family who's been able to stick around from the very beginning and not piss off Donald Trump. And part of that has roots in his childhood, which I delve into in the book, and I've spoken to you a little bit about. His father Stephen Miller's father is described to me as being very Trump-like, in terms of his business dealings, plagued by bankruptcies and lawsuits, but also in terms of just being very combative. I've found some court documents that describe him as a masterpiece of evasion and manipulation. Stephen Miller grew up in a family that was very similar to the family of Donald Trump. There's some really striking parallels when you look at, Mary Trump's book and the fights over the family inheritance and people getting pushed out and stabbed in the back. There was, a lot of allegations of that in the Stephen Miller family as well. So part of it is that Stephen Miller gets Donald Trump. He gets him, he gets him psychologically, he gets him emotionally, he gets him on a spiritual level. He shares the same values. And the other key thing about Stephen Miller is, well, there's two key things. I mean, one is he's comfortable in Trump's shadow. He never gets out ahead of him. He unlike Steve Bannon, who likes to talk about himself to journalists, Stephen Miller likes to downplay his role. So it works for Trump and Trump's ego. I mean, Stephen Miller's always describing himself as a mere devoted vehicle for Trump's agenda and downplaying his role, even though he's really the architect of the immigration policy. Donald Trump did not have any real immigration policy plans until Stephen Miller came onto the campaign and started pulling policies directly from think tanks created, by eugenicists who believe in population control. So there's that. And then there's also Stephen Miller consistently pushes Trump in the most aggressive direction in terms of his rhetoric and in terms of his policies. He never questions him. He never encourages him to calm down or take a middle road. And Trump has found that whenever he listens to somebody who is trying to take him on a more moderate path, he ends up getting ridiculed by his base as weak. And Trump hates that. Trump wants to be seen as a killer. Trump has repeatedly talked about wanting to be seen as a killer and how important it is to be a killer in society. And Stephen Miller shares, his instincts for violence. He's talked about, Stephen Miller from a very young age has talked about, fantasizing about ripping apart people with his rapists with his bare hands and wanting to watch Osama bin Laden having his body riddled with bullets. They have the same sort of fascination with violence and aggressiveness. And Stephen Miller has his hands on the pulse of Trump's most violent voting base because he has been reading white supremacist and neo-Nazi literature for such a long time. So Trump believes that Miller is critical for his reelection abilities, for his reelection prospects. He believes that Stephen Miller is the reason that he won in 2016 because of the rhetoric and the immigration policy that he brought to the table. And he believes that he needs to, rely on Stephen Miller if he wants to win in November.
We should also say that Stephen Miller had a relationship with Richard Spencer, which he now denies he had any relationship with. I'm curious, as you talk about like sort of their personal connection on some level, that Miller grew up in sort of a similar household. It also strikes me like Jared Kushner is sort of like a slight, like, I don't know, like there's like a Cain and Abel quality to them, right? I mean, they're similar in age. Kushner grew up in a household that I think was probably not terribly dissimilar from Trump. So he had a very wealthy father who was willing to literally throw his brother under the bus to avoid, that ended up getting him in prison himself. Is there any, what's their relation? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, so again, Stephen Miller's very good at managing relationships and at networking. And so he identified early on in the White House that even though he didn't agree ideologically with Kushner on many things, primarily the immigration issue, I mean, Kushner's more of a moderate on immigration. He knew that he had to manage that relationship and really, have a positive relationship with Kushner and Ivanka if he was going to want to stay in the White House. So, I mean, my sense of the relationship is that, he cedes control to Kushner whenever he sees it as being absolutely necessary. And this has actually had, the results of getting Stephen Miller some hostility from the far, his allies, in the restrictionist movement, because they believe that, he's ceded too much control to Jared Kushner as far as, allowing many work visas to remain in place, allowing merit-based immigration. These restrictionists want zero immigration. And Stephen Miller, also wants zero immigration. And the reason we don't is because Stephen Miller has understood that he needs to manage his relationships in a calculated and strategic way in order to stay in the White House.
What's your sense of Stephen Miller's relationship with a guy like Tucker Carlson?
They have a good relationship. I mean, Stephen Miller, I believe, went to, organized a meeting between Sessions back when he was working for Sessions and Tucker Carlson. Stephen Miller has developed, close relationships with numerous combative right-wing media personalities like Tucker Carlson, like Rush Limbaugh, like Ann Coulter, and he has brought their language, their very, fighting war type language into the White House, and he brought it to Capitol Hill too. I mean, people told me, Senate aides and others who I interviewed for the book tell me that the discourse on Capitol Hill was a lot more civilized, even among people who disagreed with each other, up until Stephen Miller came in and really started to transform the way that that immigration in particular was talked about, and to start using terms like, decimation and destruction, and like immigration, that the immigration posed some kind of existential threat to America. And this comes, partly from the white supremacist conspiracy theory of white genocide, which motivates so much white terrorism, like the massacre that we saw in El Paso last summer. But also it comes from, the right-wing media provocateurs like Tucker Carlson and Ann Coulter, who he has developed close relationships with, and who regurgitate his talking points, and whose talking points he regurgitates in the White House, and who invite him onto their shows. I mean, Stephen Miller very recently, after being officially identified as an extremist by the Southern Poverty Law Center, was allowed to come talk to Tucker Carlson about how the presence of federal forces in Democrat-run cities, in response to anti-racist protests, is about saving the United States. So, just that melodramatic language that he gets from having listened to people like them since he was a teenager.
This is fascinating stuff. All right, I got one last question for you. The spray on hair,
Sure.
The spray on hair incident. Can you tell us anything about that?
You're not the first person.
Can you tell us any insight? Do you have any insight into that? Like what? Yeah. Like, did Donald Trump say like,
I do actually.
You're a little shiny on top, and he just took it and he just ran with it, or what happened?
Well, I hear that it was his girlfriend, who is now his wife, who suggested that he put it on. And my main insight into that is that one of his closest friends, who's been his friend since high school, has been able to justify everything that Stephen Miller has done, including immigration, everything he did with respect to immigration. But the one thing that he cannot justify or explain to himself is how his friend Stephen Miller thought that it was okay to go on national television with the spray paint on his head. But
from my vantage
I don't
point,
have any insights.
From my vantage point, that was the best thing that Stephen Miller did in his entire career. Jean Guerrero, the book is Hatemonger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. We'll put a link to that book. It's a fascinating story. It's so important to understand what has been going on in this country, not just in terms of what we see coming out of the White House, but the idea of radicalization, the impact of right-wing talkers and these fake think tanks that they develop. And I think also, to understand when people start talking about cancel culture, where this whole idea emanates from. I really appreciate your coming on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break and head into the fun half. Just a reminder, go check out today at 3, Nomi's coverage of the DNC. The first night is tonight. Second night is tomorrow night. Third night is Wednesday night. Fourth night is Thursday night. Go check it out. Tonight, the speakers for the DNC, it really does feel, not totally, but it's like the more conservative parts of the well, I guess it's not really true. Sanders is tonight in the 10 p.m. hour. Doug Jones, Gwen Moore, Benny Thompson, Jim Clyburn, Gretchen Whitmer, Andrew Cuomo, Catherine Cortez Masto, Amy Klobuchar.
Whitmer's going to be good for appealing to the kids because she's the CEO of Quibi. So
who's that?
Whitmer is the CEO of Quibi, so the kids will be on lock.
Whitmer? No,
is that not true?
Whitman.
You're thinking Whitman.
Sorry.
Quibi
I jumped the gun on my joke.
Isn't Quibi a disaster?
Yes, a huge disaster.
Total disaster. I really feel, whenever a company like that goes, and they're not out of business yet, but you sort of get the sense that, if they're here in 18 months, I'll be shocked. Whenever there's a company like that that's just handing money out hand over fist, I always feel bad that somehow I didn't get involved in that. I love the idea of just getting into one of those sort of just supernova type of things. But that's Meg Whitman. She's the former Hewlett Packard CEO. She ran. Did she try and run for Senate? I mean, maybe I'm confusing her with somebody. I don't know why Meg Whitman would be there.
HP to Quibi, that's success to success.
Yep. Well done. And of course, John Kasich will be there. John Kasich, who, we're going to talk about the Lincoln Project when we get back on the other side of things, because I got a good little riff on the Lincoln Project, and like just sort of like bringing Republicans into this. I'm sorry. I know what people are saying that, well, they really bring other people into it. Now, maybe John Kasich might, but I mean, John Kasich doesn't have any energy that Joe Biden doesn't have. Let's do this thing on the, forget it. Let's just do this thing on the Lincoln Project. Because here's my point. Here's one of the problems with the Lincoln Project. All right. Put up this tweet. Because people are saying that, like, look, they're important. And my argument is, like, look, if they want to pay for ads against Donald Trump, fine, whatever. But make no mistake about what the Lincoln Project's project is. The Lincoln Project's project, yes, they want to defeat Donald Trump. But the Lincoln Project's project is to make people in the Democratic Party accept them and republicanism as something that is not directly responsible for Trump and not ideologically consistent with Trump. Here's an example where they let their the mask slipped for a moment, and just put that back up. Somebody says, so UPS FedEx, big opportunity here, just offered to deliver any election ballot for free, honor the postage on it, and get it there by election day. You'll be overnight become the most beloved and respected organization in America. Go on. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
no,
simple.
That is not the answer. And the Lincoln Project says, I second that emotion, right? And it's just sort of clever. I don't want to make too much of it, but basically what it is, it's like, of course they do. Because when they were just Republicans, not never Trump Republicans, but when they were just Republicans, were all behind the idea of privatizing the post office. They want to destroy that universal service because it is one of the most successful examples of why government is necessary and how it serves everyone in a universal manner. Now, people say, but they're going to convince Republicans to vote for. Here's how you know that's BS. Put up the other tweet that I sent you. 2 examples. I want you to ask yourself, who is the audience for this? Put up do you have the other tweet? The one that I sent?
Which is it on there? What number?
I sent it in the no, I sent you the other tweet. Oh yeah, here it is. The number 10. This gives you a sense of who they oh wait, that's not it. That's not the tweet that I sent you. It's the one where they take it from the DSA. It's one where they take it from the DSA.
I can look for that too. I'm going to share your screen, Brendan. Oh, you got it. There you go.
Here it is. Okay. DSA tweets out the ruling class gets rapid COVID tests so they can have parties while working class are at risk every day and wait up to 2 weeks to get test results. This is class warfare. Lincoln Project steals the tweet. Now, I know there's another issue with them stealing tweets because they want to build their brand. But what Republican do you think they are speaking to when they talk about the ruling class, when they give that exact DSA tweet? What Republican are they, the Lincoln Project? Who are they speaking to? No, they're speaking to the left. Play this ad from the Lincoln Project. Let me tell you something. I learned this when I went in to pitch an animated movie maybe 15, 20 years ago, maybe more, 20 some odd years ago. Why they put voices of actors that you recognize that are cool in animated movies. The kids don't care. The kids don't care about Jack Black's voice. My son doesn't have a clue about that. That is for the parents. That's the way that they talk to the audience they know is really in control, who brings the kids to the movie. Because if the parents leave the movie and go, it was horrible, nobody's going to bring their kid there. But if they hear somebody that they like, one of their favorite actors or someone who's really funny, they're like, yeah, it was engaging. That's just the way it works. Play this ad.
I am starting to regret my vote for Trump. I know. You guys, I know. I can overlook, and I'm okay with the blatant racism and the crass sexism and the deranged narcissism and pandering to Nazis and supporting pedophiles and proudly bragging about being a sexual predator and openly cheating your employees and mocking the disabled and praising murderous dictators and the constant pathological lying, the petty vindictive cruelty, the staggering ineptitude.
Okay, all right, we don't need to zoom in. I like that ad. It's David Cross is doing a comedy routine. How many Republicans are going to be like, oh, David Cross is really handing it to the president? That ad is not for Republicans. That ad is to ingratiate the Lincoln Project with the left. If they are supposedly the ones who are getting the John Kasich Republicans, I'm sorry, there's no John Kasich Republicans or never Trumpers, or there's no votes for them to get by using David Cross's voice. That is there to build their brand with the left. When I tweeted out about that about the post office thing, somebody responded back like, I don't think these people are so calculating as to try and get on the inside. They just want to beat Trump. I'm sorry. This is a group of, forget Republican, just political strategists. And if you don't think that all they do is calculate, that is what, like, that's the oxygen they breathe is calculation. They know exactly what they're doing. In fact, there's probably no cohort of people in the country who have a better sense of being exactly conscious of every decision they're making in terms of who they're trying to appeal to. So that's what the Lincoln Project is. They are selling themselves to the left, to the center left. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? They're not getting, maybe they're putting out some ads somewhere that are getting maybe some Republicans, maybe. And definitely their project is to get rid of Trump at this point. They have no choice. They're on the other side. They just got caught on the other side. Glenn Beck, he made the transition back because nobody cares about what he says. Glenn Beck doesn't have friends that will be like, you really going to work for Donald Trump? So Glenn Beck was able to transition back. Eric Erickson was able to transition back. All the sort of lower end hacks were able to transition back to being pro-Trump. The oat hacks, they've got to just basically insinuate themselves within the left and build their credibility so that they can go on whatever it is, MSNBC or CNN or anywhere else and be like, oh yeah, that guy, they're pretty good. So the problem is that they're not just going to attack Trump. They're going to turn around at one point. They're going to start advocating policies that are going to have the patina of being never Trump. The patina of being anti-Republican, but in fact are going to be just full-on Republican. That's the way they're going to do it. They're going to hit the ground running. The day Donald Trump is over, they're going to be hitting the ground running. All right. We got to take a break. head into the fun half of the program. We just gave you a little fun half bonus for our non-members. You can become a member by going to jointhemajority.report.com. Jointhemajority.report.com. You start to hear stuff like that Lincoln Project riff that I would normally do in the fun half. I got so jazzed up by that Miller interview, though. I couldn't help myself. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Make sure you tune in to Nomi's coverage of the DNC, of the Democratic National Convention this week, every day at 3 p.m. live, and then later, obviously, as a podcast or a video or YouTube. Check it out, patreon.com/The Nomiki Show or youtube.com/The Nomiki Show. Check it out. Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada?
Hello.
Hello.
Well, this week on the Antifada, Sean and I just recorded a pretty good episode, if I do say so myself. We talk about what's going on with the Postal Service from a leftist perspective, give a little bit of history and political economy on that, and on the bipartisan attacks on the Postal Service that have been going on for decades, and kind of set the stage for this catastrophe that we're seeing right now. Also, if you're interested in fascism, I know you touched on some themes around that in your interview today. We talk a little bit about fascism, what it is, what it isn't. Is Trump a fascist? Because I realized I kind of opened up this topic and didn't explain it that well pretty recently on this show. And I was like, you know what? I think we need to do a little bit of a deep dive on that. So we talk about the elements of different definitions of fascism. Is fascism a thing? Is fascism a process? What are fascist economics? Its compatibility with neoliberalism, and much, much more. So that's coming out on Wednesday. Patreon.com/The Antifada.
Matt.
Tomorrow on TMBS, we have Dustin Gostella, Director of Operations for Teamsters Local 623 in Philadelphia. We're going to be talking about school reopenings, the USPS, attack on it. And maybe we'll talk about some general strike stuff, as well as I want his general thoughts on the maintenance of the coercion of labor in this country throughout the pandemic. Also, I think we have an interview with a member of the Navajo Nation on how COVID is just ravaging them without, just horribly. So yeah, tomorrow night, TMBS, normal time. Check it out.
Okay, let's head into the fun half. Also, don't forget, folks, the AM Quickie at amquickie.com. 7 minutes of joy every morning as a podcast, a free podcast. You can check it out there. All right, see you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black. African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back. Fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Let's read some IMs. I know people who went to Santa Monica High School with Miller say he was the most despised person there in the years he went there by students, teachers, administration, and staff. And the poor little Snookums having to move from north of Montana, that's a street in Santa Monica, to south of Pico, another big boulevard that reaches to Santa Monica, where houses only cost $1.5 million. Yep.
Must have been real hard.
Economic anxiety, though. It is a downward movement, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I'll never forget. I loved the news story about how Stephen Miller lost a student government election to the Cobra Snake guy, that party photographer.
Oh, I don't know who the party photographer guy is, but
I forgot about that. Sounds vaguely familiar.
I've lost a couple of student government elections. I've won a couple too, but it stings when you lose. Ryan Cole, Miller has the lamest supervillain origin story ever. Country Mouths Tech, Sam, there are also fraud protections involved with USPS that do not exist for items sent through private carriers. It's just not about the voting aspect. Fan of WAP. Did I get shadow banned on the IMs just because I'm also a David Pakman fan? I mean, generally we do that. Yeah, of course. I don't even know how we would do shadow banning on that. If so, here's the difference. I actually have a Kiss My Ass at Mike Cernovich membership. Oh, very, very well done. My pal, studio mate, and fellow MR member, Fragonard, Mark from Minnesota, is now big 6-0 today. He needs a shofar. He certainly does. Do any of the MR crew believe in so-called vote shaming, i.e., do you have a problem with criticizing people for how or whether they cast a vote? Do I have a problem with criticizing people for how or whether they cast a vote? I mean, no. I don't. I mean, I don't even know what vote shaming is. As opposed to ideological shaming?
Yeah, I mean, my general line has been more concerned with Jimmy Dore, not because of how he's voting, but how he's advising people to vote, which is the type of shaming I'm more interested in. I don't care so much about how individuals have been, I mean, people are very propagandized. So how they end up making their vote, if they decide something that I think is dumb, well, try harder next time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to single out, Jenny or Bill Stevens and say, like, you guys voted wrong. But I mean, if someone comes to me with an argument that's stupid, I'm going to say the argument is stupid.
Right, because it's a persuasive attempt, I think.
And if someone is going out there and, sort of propagating stupidity, I'm going to say they're propagating stupidity. I don't know what vote shaming means. This is a made up thing. Like, I mean, yes, there are stupid people on Twitter who say, like, thank you, Bill and Jenny Stevens, for this problem today. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, voting is an action. It has consequences. It usually has very, 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 very tiny consequences because you are one vote in many. But the fact of the matter is, it's an action. It has implications. If your justification is, I'm voting this way to send a message, I got news for you. It doesn't work. We have so much evidence that this message sending does not work in that respect. Voting is not about sending a message. It is about adding one more vote for an outcome that you think is preferable to any other outcome that could possibly happen during the election. Period. End of story. And if you don't understand that, that's not an ideological, I'm not shaming you ideologically. I'm shaming you because you don't understand, like in the same way that I would say, like, hey, you shouldn't use that hammer to pick your nose. That's not a good idea. That's dumb. And then if you come to me and say, no, it's a great idea because I'll be able to pull my entire nostril off and then I'll be able to get to my boogers, I would say, like, you know what? That's really stupid. If you're genuinely, and if you're going around telling people that you're doing that, then that's a really dangerous thing to do because you're going to have a lot of people who are going to hurt themselves.
I mean, look, people got really mad at me when all I was trying to do was represent the opinions of people I know, organizers I know in DSA who take this class struggle elections thing seriously and what their arguments are against, endorsing or supporting Biden or whatever. Whereas if they had listened to the end of the episode, they would know that my personal position, if you put a gun to my head, is vote for Biden, oppose him from day one. So,
yeah. And also there's a difference between what organizations do and just what people should do when they go into the ballot box.
Yeah, it's very simple. I wouldn't expect the dog owners of America to endorse Biden. It's not obviously the same. I mean, DSA is a political organization, but that's not necessarily part of their mission statement to go out and endorse people in an election that doesn't have to do with socialism. And so it seems perfectly rational. If an individual from the DSA says, I'm not going to vote, because the DSA does not get a vote, right? Like what I'm talking about is you have access to the ballot. When you vote, you are, whatever way you vote, you are contributing to someone winning. And by not voting consciously as an act of like a conscious action, you are also contributing to who ultimately wins. You cannot escape that.
Yeah, well, to be fair, some of my comrades do think that it is the socialist responsibility not to vote for Joe Biden. So I was trying to rep their viewpoints, even though I don't necessarily agree with them. And also, I do tend to play devil's advocate in any conversation that I'm in.
Anybody who wants to come and explain that to me and own it, come on the show and we can talk about that.
Yeah, maybe I could hook it up for you.
Also, if you know anybody out there who wants to pick their nose with a hammer claw, let me also know.
I'll keep an eye out.
Hello, crew. This morning I watched the Katie Halper show. She had Jimmy Dore on. Without using your name, Sam, he called you a little cuck and a piece of shit. Oh, that's sweet. And he said when Chris Hayes got sick and you got your chance to host an MSNBC show, you were dreaming your whole life. The first thing they had you do was doing Russiagate. To quote him, they made him Russiagate like a cut. I mean, he's a effing cowardly moron.
Ew.
First off, letter
of
came
all,
out.
You're not a little cuck. You're a very big
Senate
cuck.
Intelligence. I was reporting on what Donald Trump's director of national intelligence said about Russian interference in the election, and also Chinese interference in the election. I also know for a fact that there are multiple governments that have been caught trying to break into various campaigns' emails. Multiple governments. This is real. Now, Dum for whatever reason, finds that it doesn't work out for him, but I will name him. His name is Jimmy Dore, and he is a dum-dum. And if he has half of a testicle that he claims to have, he will come on this show or invite me on his show like he had promised originally 4 years ago. But he's not. He's a coward. His convictions can only withstand stroking. That's it. So,
Congressman common misconception about you, Sam, that you're a little cuck.
That's right.
People don't realize you stand up, you're actually pretty big and tall for a cuck.
That's right. That's also true. What's annoying and insincere about people like Dore is that they want to pretend the action of not voting is moral, but don't want to own the negative consequences that it benefits white nationalist theocrats like Trump, Miller, and Pence. Well, also, Jimmy Dore also told me what was going to happen when Hillary Clinton lost was that we would get Elizabeth Warren. You can go back and listen to it. That was his strategy. And how the Democrats are going to be able to stop Mitch McConnell from seating two Supreme Court justices. Jimmy Dore is just an idiot. That's all. That's all. He's an idiot.
Useful idiots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's useful, but he is an idiot. Let's go to the phone.
I mean, I think he's useful to the right wing. I mean, I think that sort of dumb election stuff, I think that is just a gift to the GOP. I'd underwrite it if I was a Republican operative.
Absolutely. Call him from an 859 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's up? It's Oz from Kentucky.
Hey, Oz, you got to back off your phone a little bit.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so if you recall the last time we spoke, we were talking kind of about what your guest was speaking on today. And if you remember, particularly, we talked about Umbrella Man, and we were speculating on his identity. But he's been identified as a Hell's Angel, and which makes perfect sense to me because the Hell's Angels are down with the Bikers for Trump, and they're down with the Back to Blue, which is pretty crazy because they're meth dealers and human traffickers, but they're mostly white, so that's why they're in on it. But really, I see the Bikers for Trump as the modern day wannabe Nazi motor corps. But I don't know if you're aware of the connections between the Bikers for Trump and the Florida-based Spetsnaz Motorcycle Club.
No.
Which is also, you should really look into it because it's actually the Spetsnaz Motorcycle Club is directly connected with the Russian Night Wolves motorcycle gang, which is basically an enforcer for Putin. So check out the Spetsnaz Motorcycle Club. That's Spetsnaz, and they're based out of Florida, and they're heavily tied with Trump, and they directly tie Trump with Putin, and the Bikers for Trump thing and the Hells Angels connections. It's really messed up because a lot of these, when they're meeting out there at Little Sturgis, there's thousands of paramilitary. That's what they're organizing there. And my participation in the Cincinnati protest, I told you last time, I saw the AB and the 3%ers dressed up like Antifa out there, communicating with cops and looting and escalating and infiltrating and subverting. That's what they do. They've been doing that since it's modern day Pinkerton, and it's pretty scary seeing what went the street fighting in Michigan over the weekend. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't.
There's like over 100 people just brawling out, just going at it in the street. Trumpists and BLM and whoever else is there. Yeah, you can see all the.
Oh, is that the video where the Proud Boy falls flat on his face at one point?
I didn't see that, but I know that was a Proud Boy event in.
I think I saw some
Oregon
of that.
And Michigan, and then you had the thing going on down in Stone Mountain, Georgia. So you had the 3 different events like that going on over the weekend. The Proud Boys shot a bunch of people with
paint guns,
paintballs, yeah. And then they get protected by the cops. I mean, that's a public knowledge. They did that since Patriot Prayer the past few years. I used to live on the West Coast and Shasta, and I've seen how corrupted. I used to work on a tree crew that was mainly ex-con. I mean, I am an ex-con too. And like I said, it's a reality that I'm not proud of, but I saw some of the worst racism that I've ever seen was actually in Northern California, and I'm from Kentucky, and that's
Wow.
saying a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but check out that Spetsnaz Motorcycle Club and the Russian Nightwolf connection with the Bikers for Trump.
Okay, will do. Appreciate the call.
All right, thanks. Yep, thank you.
Certainly something to keep an eye on.
I mean, what was interesting to me about what the Stephen Miller book talks about in terms of California is that there was, California at that time, the right-wing talkers and the recall of Gray Davis, and then just sort of the crap show, Schwarzenegger gets elected, beats out Gary Coleman for governorship. There was like 15 people running for governor. Schwarzenegger, not someone you would anticipate would have sort of a good handle on governmental policy, et cetera, and in many respects, I don't know, one hopes that the country is on a similar trajectory where there is like a freak out period where people are, white knuckled, because this is when California, incidentally, was becoming a so-called majority minority state. And white culture is, they're worried about white culture losing out. And that's where all this freak out stuff came from in California. One hopes that a similar dynamic will end in the same way in the country at large here. We may have another 10 or 15 years to go, maybe less. And we start getting stuff. I mean, you look at what's happening in California right now. Based upon what their ability to do is, their capacity to do is, things are moving in a pretty far left direction there. I mean, we're not talking, democratic socialism, but we're talking about like relative to where California was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it's moving in the right direction. So we'll see. Hopefully there'll be a similar trajectory for the country. Sam, I've been a listener for several years now. I miss your debates with libertarians and right-wingers. Any chance you could set some more of them up, maybe in the fun half, or a separate phone number for people who want to debate? Thanks. Also, David will be doing coverage of the DNC because he want to win. I know it. We had vacation planned for next week, and it was, and then all of a sudden all the conventions shifted, and were it not for the fact that it's a vacation that I'm doing not just with my kids, and there's obviously some scheduling schedules issuing issues with that, but also with family members, and people have been quarantining and preparing to get together, and et cetera, we would change it. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Sam's sinking poll average. How can I talk to my right-wing relative who hates de Blasio from the right while I hate him at least as disappointed from the left without accepting his frame? That's tough. I am like de Blasio. He's really dropping the ball on this teacher stuff, I think, and the school stuff. But
yeah, he is. I mean, I think it is possible sometimes to speak to right wingers from a leftist position and starting with the common ground if you both hate the liberals, and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I would imagine the hate is from a different perspective, though. But
usually there's a little bit of overlap. I don't know. I don't have that many Republicans in my life, but when I go visit my friends' parents in rural Rhode Island, I get to talk to all of their friends, and sometimes it's interesting.
Well, I mean, I remember being on Larry Kudlow's show and coming on to talk about the stimulus that Obama did. And they started off with the premise the stimulus is an abomination. And I said, absolutely, I totally agree. We should have more money. And they all just stood there. They had no idea how to respond to that. They were so prepared for me to defend the Obama stimulus. They had no response when I said, you guys are right. There should be a lot more spending as opposed to tax cuts in this. I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars more. And I just remember, I think it was like Jim Pefafukis, who is now, I don't know where he was, an AP writer. He was like the American, whatever. It's
the AEI guy?
Yeah, AEI guy, yeah. And Kudlow, and they were all just sort of like, they didn't know, they just weren't prepared for that. But that's not the same thing. Hi, Sam. I'm a mailman in Western New York. Last week, our local postmaster announced we could be expected to cut down on equipment in the office. This meant shelves for sorting mail, carts for moving it. These things have no operational or maintenance costs. Removing them is solely meant to make our job more difficult. This week, while we were sorting in the morning, we were read verbatim several speeches given by DeJoy assuring us he's on our side. It's infuriating. And the worst part is seeing how many of my coworkers in my small rural office ignore their eyes and ears and continue to support Trump.
Jesus.
It's nuts.
They were read
Mark
that?
Meadows. What's that?
They were read DeJoy's comments.
Yeah.
Record that next time. If your boss starts reading DeJoy propaganda off, I want to see what that looks like.
Yeah, that would be cool. Just be careful. Here's Mark Meadows. Despite the fact that we know there's been reporting to this effect, we've heard firsthand accounts from postal workers that the post office has been decommissioning postal sorting machines. Here is Mark Meadows on that question.
Are you saying that sorting machines have not been taken offline and removed? Are you asserting that did not happen?
I'm saying that sorting machines between now and the election will not be taken offline. Listen, I had postal under my
the ones that have been taken offline in the last couple of months.
No, but listen, here's what I'm saying is, when you look at it, the normal process of doing all of this, Jake, I had the postal system under. I had the only bipartisan bill to actually deal with the $146 billion loss that the Postal Service has been will see over the next 10 years. And so when you're looking at this, these postal machines and the drawdown, that was a 2006 bill that has been implemented that I don't necessarily agree with, but that's not this Postmaster General that did that. That was the previous Postmaster General under Obama.
I get that. Why were these sorting machines taken offline? Why were they taken offline? And why have why
Jake,
has the Postmaster
you keep
General
saying that, so get your producer, Jake, you keep saying that. Get your producer to share where exactly those sorting machines were taken offline. Let them whisper in your ear, because what I'm telling you is you're picking up on a narrative that's not based on facts.
Okay, he's lying. We know postal sorting machines were taken offline and destroyed. NBC News reported on Friday that an internal document showed that Postmaster General Louis DeJoy is decommissioning 671 of the USPS's letter sorting machines across the U.S. Now, maybe they have put a halt to that. Meadows was very clear. From now until Election Day, we're not going to decommission any more machines. They got caught. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see in hearings, hopefully, in the coming days, maybe a couple weeks, whether DeJoy answers that question honestly, under oath, because these machines are quite large. They're quite expensive. There's a lot of people who saw them and saw that they were gone the next day. It's going to be a little bit difficult to lie about these things.
Also, saying the Democrats did it too doesn't make it okay. That's not an adequate defense for stuff that the Republicans are doing.
The bottom line is that and I would like to get more on the legislative history of that. My understanding is that there were people trying to get out of town when this bill was passed in 2006. It was controlled by the Republicans. There were definitely Democratic co-sponsors for this bill. It was all voice vote. I mean, all what do you call it? It was not a recorded vote. It was all just a voice vote.
Yeah,
I think
a voice vote happens
consent.
when something is not that controversial, right?
When nobody wants to put up a big fight against it. And I don't know what the thinking was. It would be interesting to see some reporting on what was going on contemporaneously, because I know for a fact there were Democrats complaining about it at that time. And I don't know if it's one of those situations where they're like, we can't stop this because we don't control Congress. We don't control the Senate. There's no doubt that there was Democratic co-sponsors, but like, it's not controversial that there's a significant segment of the Democratic Party, and it certainly in 2006 was even more dominant, I would imagine, where there were corporatists who would be very excited to privatize the Postal Service.
Oh, yeah. All those Obama appointees that Bernie blocked, that people are like mad at him for, they were trying to privatize the Postal Service. There was a Reagan guy. There was a payday lending lobbyist guy who I assume he wanted on there to block postal banking. Like, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, a certain number of them, I think, have to be Republicans, but it didn't have to be those Republicans that he was attempting to appoint. And there were the Postal Service Union, the NAACP, there was a whole array of leftist organizations who wanted those members of the Board of Governors to be blocked. So that's obviously taking place 4 years later. But it would be interesting to see like an actual TikTok and good reporting on this, because I know contemporaneously I had people on when that was happening, talking about it and characterizing it as a Republican initiative. Now, like I say, there may have been Democrats involved in it, but I don't think it's quite as easy to say that it's been both parties' agenda to privatize the post office, or guess what? The post office will be privatized. That is the one thing when they have
been making cuts.
Huh?
I believe they were successful in making some cuts, right?
Well, at the very least, they were. Well, it wasn't a question of cuts. It was a question of, that legislation, the two biggest parts of that legislation.
The pension funding and the not having the cap on what they could charge for stamps, right? I feel like I'm at school right now doing a quiz.
Yeah. There you go. You got that right. You get an A. But there it is. Mark Meadows just completely, out and out lying. That's not terribly surprising. But I hope that the broader sort of understanding of the post office, I hope we get postal banking out of this. But B, I also hope that people understand sort of the dynamic of the Postal Service, that it's a perfect example of why government can do things better than private industry. Because I got news for you. If you live out in East, West, North, or South, bum F, you ain't getting mail if it's privatized unless you want to pay an arm and a leg for it.
Mm-hmm. We really waxed poetic on the Postal Service this week, me and Sean. And one of our tests for if a government institution is worth defending or not is, would we still have this under communism? And I think with the mail, the answer is definitely yes.
There you go. There you go.
You got to have mail.
Here is Donald Trump saying now that the data is in and wealthy folks are in no way suffering economically from this pandemic, Donald Trump has decided it's over and we no longer have to provide support for the literally tens of millions of people who are looking at eviction, tens of millions of people who are looking at a reduction in their unemployment insurance, tens of millions of people who are out there suffering. And frankly, you're going to see I would imagine, millions of people who are impacted by the failure of many small businesses. Not to mention what's going to happen on the other side of this when we have an even greater concentration of wealth and power. But here's Donald Trump basically telling you everything's fine.
After 3 weeks of absolutely no deal, you have been ragging on Democrats constantly. Why not come to the table personally and sit with them? I mean, I know that Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader Schumer were in the Oval Office in December 2018. That did not go so well. Everybody in the world saw that. Why not invite them? If they don't want to come, that's on them.
So I think we've done very well. We've had 3 phases. We're into phase 4. We've gotten everything we wanted, and we've also gotten a great economy. All you have to do is take a look at these charts. Our economy is doing good, but we want different things than them. I want money for the people. They want money to bail out Democrat governors and Democrat mayors. Listen to me. My people are doing very good, and my people call me. They're in the office. They call me. When it's right. Nobody knows the deal better than I do. When it's right, I'll meet. But right now, it's not right. They want $1 trillion to bail out badly run states. They're Democrat. They're Democrat states. Will something happen? Possibly. But I want to tell you, the country is doing very well right now. We can live very happily with it, without it. But I'd like to do it because I want to give money to the people. I want to put money into the people's hands. They want to put money into politicians' hands so that the politicians don't look stupid. Okay.
I don't, incidentally, when money is distributed by the federal government to states and to cities, it can be earmarked for specific uses. There can be federal funding that is very specific in where it goes. It does not go into the pockets of politicians. It's a good argument against block grants for Medicaid, for instance, that he's making. I don't think he's doing it on purpose. But you want to give the money directly to people? Okay, give the money directly to people. Let's see those $2,000 a month checks going there. Let's see some money go directly to schools, exclusively for schools. How about exclusively to rehire any city or state employees that you have laid off? That's it. You can put those ties on it. You could say this money is available only in this circumstance. You can do that, of course. That's not the issue. The issue is Donald Trump wants to attempt to, I don't know. I don't know why Donald Trump wouldn't want to do this. I mean, he doesn't care about blue states because he thinks he's going to lose those anyways. Jake Tapper, shocked that Donald Trump has that attitude. Can you imagine being shocked that Donald Trump has that attitude at this point? Honestly, I hate, there's nothing I hate more about than tweets going like, are you really surprised? Are you really surprised? Like that, I really don't like. And Jake Tapper, to be fair, I think has an audience that there might be some people who are shocked. And so he's shocked as a way of basically signaling to those people, you should be shocked by this.
Yeah, I'm starting to think this Donald Trump guy is not so good.
Yeah, it's like a David Cross routine from 2018.
Yeah. Also, I love that little rhetorical flourish he always does where he's like, I don't have to help people. It would be fine if I didn't, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Just so they know that they deserve nothing. And then they are happy and excited when he gives them $1,200 to Trump bucks.
Let's be clear. I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy. I'm even a good guy for thinking about doing something good for them.
It's a little like the kind of gaslighting like a kidnapper does or something,
Yeah. You're really lucky I don't kill you. I could, but I won't. Maybe I will, but maybe I won't. I don't know. It will put the lotion in the basket, right? Let him put the lotion in the basket.
Oh my God, thank you.
So the national polls are tightening a little bit, but there's still a lot of polls that show Biden up by double digits, up in some of the swing states. But who knows? Many respects, the election doesn't become real for a lot of people until September. And Donald Trump is pretty confident about his reelection chances based upon the votes. It's all in the votes.
There will be anyone else who leaves your cabinet after the election, sir?
So if we have the success, I think we have a silent majority, the likes of which has never been seen before. I think you read about it, where 62% of the people say they're not even telling the truth on polling, and where the polling is fake, where they do registered voters and where they do many more Democrats than they do Republicans. Same as happened last time. But this year, I think we have much more enthusiasm. Maybe those people back there would understand it better than anybody, but I think there's more enthusiasm for 2020 than there was even for 2016. And 2016 was a record. You found that out. And I believe there's much more enthusiasm now than there was even in 2016. We have a silent majority, the likes of which nobody has seen. I just looked. There are thousands of boats in lakes, rivers, and oceans, thousands and thousands of boats. It's called Voters for Trump, Voters for Trump-Pence. There's signs all over. Some of the boats have 10 flags on them. They're incredible. There are thousands. We did nothing to do this. This is just generic. It just happened. Let me just tell you, I think the level of enthusiasm for what we're doing, we want law and order. We want low taxes. They want to raise your taxes. They want to they want to have open borders, and they want to defund the police. How do you win on that? They want to go to Texas, and they want to go to Pennsylvania, and they want to stop fracking, and Ohio, they want to stop fracking. They're against steel. They're against anything with petroleum, the word petroleum in it. You won't have a country. These people are crazy.
A lot of boaters. I mean, I don't know if organic showers of boat going folks.
Generic showers of boats.
Generic, completely generic boaters.
One of the elements of fascism traditionally that is sort of absent from Trump is the presence of a violent street movement. A few losers notwithstanding, they've been on the back foot since Charlottesville. However, one thing people failed to reckon with is maybe you shouldn't be looking on the streets. Maybe you should be looking at the lakes and the rivers because he's got a whole armada there.
We control all of the waterways.
Oh my gosh.
My
Antifa.
Boots on the water is what I put on. Boots on the water.
Oars in the rivers.
Oars in the water.
We need to start spreading some stories about Antifa U-boats.
Oh, yeah. We're working on our Navy division right now.
I will say this. It is one thing that strikes me as I watch this is that Trump, it's hard for him to figure out what is a viable critique without having an audience of, he does it on Twitter on some level, but I really do think that he would go out and do those campaign things and he would just gauge what the applause or the laughter was as a way of saying, this is the way I should go. I'm going to go this way. And so he's out there and he's just throwing stuff against the wall. And the tough part is that, first off, everybody's there wearing masks. They're all reporters. They're not going to clap or whatnot. And he's just not getting the same reinforcement. I mean, so he's going through with fracking and it just seems, completely not of the moment. And I have no doubt that there are areas, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, where there are people who are very committedly pro-fracking. But the other problem is that these people know is that there's not enough demand anymore. And to the extent that the fracking has dropped off, it is a function of the expense associated with fracking to get the oil out of the ground is not financially viable at the moment. And all these people know this. And so it's sort of I don't know, it's a second order issue, it seems to me, in those states. Now, maybe it might resonate enough in Pennsylvania and Ohio, but Texas, is he worried about Texas? If he's worried about Texas, he's got a lot of problems. But I don't know what their internal polling looks like. But good news for Donald Trump. You know, Jamie said, one of the things about fascism is that you really need to have some boots on the ground. And Donald Trump might have those oars in the water, as it were, or the fins in the water or whatnot. But where could Donald Trump possibly find like boots on the ground full of guys? Because I imagine, he wants strong arm tactics. There'll be maybe some women too, but sort of people to go out there and bust some heads. Can he find anything like that? I don't know. Let's play this clip, number 3.
Now, many times people say that a union like ours, law enforcement groups, give endorsements. Not in the New York City PBA, sir. In the New York City PBA, Mr. President, you earned the endorsement, and you've earned this endorsement. I'm proud to give it.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, that was the other part of our discussion. We kind of came to the conclusion that Trump doesn't need a grassroots street movement to bust people's heads because he has the police, and that's much more orderly, and he prefers it that way. He hates populism. He doesn't even like touching people.
You got to have good uniforms. You got to look good in a uniform. And, the federal police force that they're assembling, I mean, this is historically, in any oppressive regime, it is oddly the police who are recruited to do the worst of the worst and are willing to do it, as opposed to the military, which is in many respects more professionalized.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, well, the military doesn't weed out normal people in the same way that the cops do. I've had some discussions about this with people because I was trying to understand it too.
That's right. It's a different composition. And police forces in many respects are more engineered in some ways. They're brought in from outside of the areas where they're supposed to police. And the military comes from everywhere in the country. Cities, suburbs, rural. In Cuba and in Havana, when I was there, the people would talk about how most of the cops in Havana are brought in from the countryside so that they have a natural distrust of the city dwellers.
There's a lot of that going on in Belarus and Minsk right now. If you look at the Minsk law enforcement people doing a lot of the roundups, it's guys from the country that are sort of resentful of the people in the city.
This is an age-old dynamic in many respects. I mean, here it plays out with a little bit of suburbs versus the city in New York anyways. But that is definitely the dynamic. Rural urban divide is not just an American phenomena. It is age old in many respects. What should we do? I got the Lincoln Project stuff.
There's Tim Pool and Glenn Beck.
Yes, let's do that. Tim Pool on with Glenn Beck. When does Jimmy Dore go on with Glenn Beck? Isn't there like a sort of like a grifter parade that they can go through there? This is my prediction. You're going to see it. It will happen. I don't know when, but it will happen. In the meantime, we do have Tim Pool and Glenn Beck. And this is a clip about sex robots that we all know are en route. I mean, we already have sex robots, don't we?
Only very crude versions of that.
Crude versions.
Yeah, not the sublime versions that Tim and Glenn are talking about.
Yeah, they're really heavily, focused on this. And we can tell because Vic Berger has edited this in a way that will make us see what's really going on.
But I think, look, left unchecked, humans are going to make virtual reality games where they can just, I'll try not to be crude, but, pleasure themselves.
Oh, no, it's coming. It's absolutely coming. And what are you going to do about that?
And I just think, how much money do we allocate towards curing things like baldness? But Baldness isn't the big concern. It's just kind of a funny thing to poke at.
Well, what is he trying? Well, first off, don't we have virtual reality like sex on some level, right? I mean, isn't that like video?
VR goggles, yeah, you can.
Well, they're not satisfied with that, Sam.
Yeah, you don't have like this. They want like a. I think they. I imagine they want like
trying to perfect it and
a
yes,
bodysuit.
all of the fact of the matter is that all of our great technological advances, particularly involving the internet, but just broadly speaking, have come from the porn industry.
True.
That's where it starts, and then that's digital memberships. For this show, I mean, we didn't get the technology directly from a pornography, but it's the same. It's the models that are developed there.
Yeah, high definition and broadband. What do you think's pushing that technology forward?
Exactly. In fact, when I did Who's the Caboose, our production insurance was under the umbrella of an adult film company.
Oh, the name sounds like it could be a porn too.
That's also part of it. But what's the whole thing about the baldness? I can't tell you. It's a little bit out of context.
I don't know if I'm following their argument correctly. Are they saying that too much money is being spent on sex robots and not enough on curing baldness?
That's what I took.
They're just predicting things that are going to happen in the future that they're pretending to have a problem with.
Because they're if you cure our baldness, we won't need the sex robots.
Yeah, that's a pretty negative.
Probably not just his lack of hair that's holding him back in that regard. If here is Donald Trump. His brother has passed away. Donald Trump's brother. We don't know why. We don't know what killed his brother, which is odd. Because generally we hear about this in the course of events, not just for famous people, for people broadly speaking. How did they die? I wonder how Donald Trump's brother died in this era of a pandemic. Certainly people die, obviously, during pandemics that have nothing to do with the pandemic, but you generally hear an explanation, particularly when it's the president's brother. Here he is on Fox and Friends. And he gets really animated when he starts talking about screwing over Democrat governors. But here he is talking about his brother.
Was loyal people. There was no jealousy. A lot of times in families, I hate to say it, but there's jealousy, and especially among children and among children that are competitive children. Because he was very competitive. There was not an ounce of jealousy. He'd go around talking about how great this is for the country, and it's so incredible, and he was my biggest fan. People would tell me all the time, I spoke to your brother, and your brother was so thrilled and so thrilled at what was happening. And what was happening for the country was he was so angry with China because of what happened where the plague came in and they shouldn't have allowed it to happen. They could have stopped it. He was so upset by that. He couldn't, more than people would be upset. A lot of people have already forgotten, and you can't forget. But he was a fantastic guy.
Well, we're very sorry for your loss. And
well, thanks.
So let's be clear here. His brother was a great guy because he had no jealousy of how much more success Trump had over his brother. That's one of the things when I assess the people in my life, I look around at how well they accept the fact that I'm that much better than they are and that much more successful. And when I notice that there's no resent or jealousy, I say, good for you. Good for you. You really are handling my enormous success and deserved success, to be honest, very well. I appreciate that about you. That is one of the best things I can say about you, is that you really deal with the fact that I have outshone you so much. And then just weirdly, he just brings up, remember, we don't know how Robert Trump died, but in the course of eulogizing him by saying he's the type of guy who would not resent his brother who was so much more successful. Also, though, he was also mad at China for the China virus. Don't know why, just sort of randomly mad at China. People forget about that. People forget that it came from China. I don't know. I find that all very suspect.
Mm. Well, we know that he went to the movies when his other brother was dying in the hospital. So it should give you a little
that's one
window
of the things
into
that I
his
really
psyche.
like about my other brother is that he's the type of guy who has no resent or jealousy that when you go to a movie, when you're on your deathbed, somebody else goes to a movie on your deathbed. There are two things I look for in people. One, don't resent me because I'm so great. And two, cut me some slack when I go see a movie instead of meeting you on your deathbed. So
What do I remember about my brother? Well, he really liked me a whole lot. And people said he liked me a lot. And that's what I remember about him.
one of the best attributes of my brother was how much he knew I was great and liked me for it. That was a lot. He had some weaknesses, of course, but that was his strength. He really could tell me that I was the best.
He was like, go see Cars 4. Have fun.
Exactly.
Don't worry about me.
Exactly. He knew how much I wanted to see that movie. And so
there's a little bit more, I think, that he said on Saturday, according to Daniel Dale, if you want to read this, Sam.
Sure. What is it? Let's see. Pop it up. Well, we did interact, and he was always there, and he was, he wasn't a jealous person. He was a very smart guy, but he wasn't, he would be there, and he'd be behind me, and if I had the number one show, I had a big success no matter what I did, whether it was real estate deals or anything else, was right there. In many cases, he helped me very much with whatever I did. And then when I became president, he was, I think, one of the most loyal people. There was no jealousy. A lot of times in families, I hate to say it, but there's jealousy, and especially among children that are competitive children, because he was very competitive.
That's the rest of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you had a lead in prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there you go. It
sounds about right.
Even worse. It's even worse. Brandon Straka got a retweet. I don't care. Do we care about seeing this?
No.
A lot of people are saying that I should release the Brandon Straka debate. Did we not release that?
Didn't we release that?
I thought we
released it beforehand.
Members.
No, I thought it was just for members. Maybe we got to unlock that.
Gotcha.
Maybe we should stop giving him attention.
Well,
Trump gave him some.
Trump just retweeted him. I mean,
oh God!
Strike while the iron's hot. Yeah.
Well, everybody, Democrat, walk away. Walk away. Let's go to the IMs. P word. I did that. Dr. Demon Seaman. Hello, Sam. It's me, Dr. Demon Seaman with Quibi, here to offer you a lucrative contract with our platform. All right. It's a little late for that. Sorry. Just subscribe to the Nomiki show for the DNC coverage. All right. Great. Do so. You will not be disappointed. Zero Sum Sam. Let's see. The entire administration of criminals. What's happening in the post office? Direct attack against democracy. How much longer should we sit back and just allow this to happen? Can you use a broken machine to fix it, or must you go outside it? You've mixed a lot of metaphors. How do you go outside a? I see what you're saying. You're saying that American democracy is broken. How do you fix it, from the inside or the outside? I don't know. What's the option on the outside?
There are many options.
I don't think they're talking specifically about the post office. Foreign agent. The one time my wife listens to the Majority Report and freaking Matt has to bring up CBD foot rubs. WTF. Teacher Dan, Pelosi and Schumer are at least calculating as the Lincoln Project. They also know what they're doing. They fend off the left. Interesting that the Lincoln Project feels left of our Democratic leaders. I mean, I agree with you. And I think there's probably more awareness of that on the left about Pelosi and Schumer, at least. The problem is that the Lincoln Project helps Pelosi and Schumer. Simple Socialist. How is Janine doing? Huge fan of all of her work. Would love to see her on the Majority Report or just more active in general. think she's doing good. I've texted her a couple of times during COVID, but everybody's laying low. Comedians can't do much. Pajama Boy, and certainly if you're like Janine, who eschews any type of tech. Pajama Boy, Sam, you know who you've been saying the 5-time award-winning Majority Report for 5 years now? No more awards. David Pakman winning all of them. Well, they won't. The actual like People's Choice Award is named after the Majority Report. It is the Majority Report News and Politics Award because that's what happens. You win for the 5 times, then you're in the pantheon. Huh. So really, I mean, you could say 6-time award-winning, but the 5, it was just easier for me to remember. Calling from 858 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Jesse, calling in from Poway, California.
Jesse, what's on your mind?
I wanted to share this story about my manager who was a flat Earth Trump supporter.
Okay.
Yeah. Took me a year and a half, and I'm turning her into a socialist.
Wow, you're in for the long game. And that's a good job. All right, so how did you do it?
Hell yeah.
Now, was she literally a flat earther?
Yes.
Okay.
She literally, I remember you joking about seeing that car window with the geothermal watch dot whatever thing.
Okay.
She referred me that site once.
All right. Bingo.
Like full blown weather controlling machine. Yeah.
Well, that part's actually real, but go ahead. And so how are you achieving this success?
It's taken the full year and a half and I'm still getting there, and it's only until like a few months where she's made like some remarkable changes.
Well, that's the way change happens, incidentally. You push. And honestly, it's very incremental. And then the same action that you take on Thursday, that you take on Tuesday does very little, but then on Thursday, something clicks and boom. That's the way growth happens.
Exactly. Yeah. And she's even said how like things are making more sense to her. She said how the 2 big ones is she said how energy should be free and education should be free.
Excellent.
2 things I never thought she would recommend at all. And 2 things I've never really told her should be like absolutely free for everyone either. Though I do believe that, but still. A lot of it, she saw like economic aspects of it because of being in her position. She sees the growth that we have quarter after quarter, and she sees that none of the employees' wages are changing at all. So she was able to understand the economic aspect of it, and the social aspect of it just came over time of accepting, other people and stuff.
Does she still believe that the planet is flat?
No, she no longer believes the planet is flat.
What?
I even asked her that directly of like, do you think the planet's flat? Like,
and did she explain like why she stopped believing that?
I didn't explain to her why she stopped believing that. And I didn't explain to her exactly why the planet is not flat. That's not exactly the argument I focus on.
Right. No, I understand.
But but I think over time, just everything else just falling into place and making more sense, and her just being able to scrutinize people more and think about things more. It's led her to think like, maybe, the world isn't flat and everyone else may be right on that one.
I mean, what's extraordinary about that is that's a fairly large sort of reversal, it seems to me, right? Like you believe that the world is not round, and then you believe that actually it is round. That to me feels like a very dramatic reversal. I'd be curious as to know like what precipitated that.
Yeah, because if you can change someone's mind about that
one day,
yeah, that would be great.
I'm sorry. What was that, Jamie?
Oh, I just said if you could change someone's mind about that, the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is by far like one of the, and I love talking politics, but this is by far the biggest accomplishment in it is changing this person's mind. And I work with her, almost every day, so it's someone I would like to change her mind.
I'd be curious as to what precipitated it. I mean, obviously you've been working on it, and I think that's the way you got to do it. You got to do it slow.
Yeah. And at first it was like very heated and stuff, but it turned into her like, asking more questions rather than, angry responses.
Yeah.
And then it turned to her like, really like, hey, so it seems like all of this is really just like a big class struggle type thing. And it, bringing up concepts that I haven't even talked to her about.
She's
yeah.
She's PMC too.
Well, they say sometimes the conspiracy theories are Marxism for idiots because it takes a vague sense that things are wrong somehow, or that there is a class of people conspiring against the rest of us, and then it comes up with some really fantastical explanations that are not rooted in material reality.
Yeah.
Except for the weather
it's
machine.
The same whole concept that Sam Stevenson saying with the whole Alex Jones thing.
Yep.
And she's self-proclaimed like she loves conspiracy theories and stuff, and so I try to point her into the conspiracies that she should follow more.
Well, let me
because some of them are real.
Let me
Let's
give
be
you
real
one of
here.
these because I think you earned it.
Hell yeah.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that.
All right. Well, if you have her call in, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com and let us know, and I'll be sure to be on the
yeah. And if she wants any further reading on this, can I recommend a pamphlet called How to Overthrow the Illuminati? You can Google it. It'll come up. We did an episode of the Antifada about it a while back, but I think it's a good way to take someone's beliefs seriously who believes in Illuminati conspiracy theories, which are often connected to the flat earth ones, and sort of take it apart piece by piece and explain that the real conspiracy is capitalism.
Yeah, and I've been trying to disengage her from her media and turned her on things like Majority Report, and I think that would be the biggest next step for her. But as you were saying before about like convincing conservatives, like, siding with them against liberals, that was actually a very big help when it came to this, because her main criticism would be towards, liberals and Democrats. And I could easily just say, well, hey, I don't defend that. And I make it very clear the distinction between Democrats, Republicans, and progressives.
Good for you. Appreciate the call.
Thank you. Have
Thanks.
a great one.
You too. Good job. Success story.
Nice
The
to
weather
have
machine
good
stuff
news.
is true, though. The weather machine stuff is
Yeah,
true.
well, we don't got to spread that around.
Doctor from New Jersey. I made a YouTube video called Real Physician Reacts to Ben Shapiro and his sad, inaccurate doctor wife. People seem to be enjoying it. Send a link. Disco Stew. There are several new Jimmy Dore-style grifters on the left, and it would be great to devote some time debunking their BS because there's an overlap of your audience. Start with Matt Taibbi.
That's I don't know if we want to open that bag of potato chips at 2:30 p.m.
Gregory, Jimmy Dore isn't a serious person. He also insulted Michael, so he can go F himself. Benchwarmer, Sam or probably Matt. When are we going to get a subscribe button on Twitch? Mike from PA can't be the only one who has the crew's faces as emotes.
We can't monetize Twitch because we have to be exclusive to Twitch if we do that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I got to check on that. Bull Prague, I only ate spinach as a kid when my mom pressed the barrel of a shotgun to my temple. Yeesh. V, I've started teaching my middle school Zoom class, so I began the intro with pressure drop. It's Monday and class objectives on today's program. Oh, that's fun if that's true. Brock from VA. What's the annoying and sincere about people like Doors that they want to pretend the action of not voting is moral, but don't want to own the negative consequences? Okay, yeah. All right, I think I heard that one. Congressional baseball fan. It is my birthday. In honor of Michael, who is only a few days older than me, I have to say happy birthday to me, Jew boy. Can I get a shofar? Yeah, I'll give you one for that. And as always, play ball. West Coast comrade Jimmy Dore is just a stupid comedian. Well, I mean, he's not just a stupid comedian. He's a stupid comedian, and he also has a very big audience.
I'd say he's more known as a political commentator, actually.
Yeah. Josh from Chicago. Can I get a possible shofar for shaming my buddy who got an internship with Kennedy's campaign and persuading him to get an internship with Markey? Yeah, I'll give you that. We really handed him out like today. Lawn Chair Media. Let's call this post office for what it really is. Peak season for the UPS is Christmas. This is a war on Christmas.
Oh, well, in that case, it's good, and I support it. Sorry.
Bear at home, me too. Any chance you can get some more of them up? I think I would anticipate there being, well, first of all, I don't know if it's like people fill up our phone lines and we can't get any conservatives to call in. Maybe we need to come up with a conservative hotline. Maybe that's what we need to do. It will work for a week, and then everybody's like, well, I'm going to get on the conservative line.
Pretend to be a conservative.
Yeah, something like that. But we could try it for a while, see if people aren't jerks about it. But my guess is after the election, we'll have more opportunity for that. If the Democrats win, you're going to see more libertarians. People are going to be, it's all going to be about remaking the Republican right. And when Democrats are in power, libertarians really come out of the woodwork because they're like, oh, we've got to appeal. Conservatives are in the wilderness. We've got to appeal to the Democrats. How do we do that? Well, we just start talking about liberty again. And, that's why that's when Sam Harris, there's a reason why Sam Harris is just not in the conversation as much as he used to be. And that is because he got outflanked on his perspective. Go read this book on Stephen Miller, and you will see that when you hear talk about the cancel culture and this, there are things that happen in our culture, and there's certainly stuff to be talked about in terms of how social media has empowered different people, how people are not discerning about what comes through social media yet because it's such a relatively new phenomena. These are all...
You could talk about at-will employment if you're concerned about people getting fired, which I hold is a separate issue than what people talk about when they say cancel culture.
Right, of course. There's a whole different sets of these things that are, but cancel culture as it's thrown around is really just the extension of anti-PC, which is just the extension of we can't, I don't like to be constrained. I don't like to be ostracized because I'm saying to, hey, sweetheart, you look good today. Why can't I say that in the workplace? Or hey, sweet legs. That's they come in. I like getting a compliment, but now we got to be all PC about it. And or I'm going to get canceled at work because all I wanted to do was say you have nice ankles. That's all. I like it when people compliment me. That's what's going on here. And when Donald Trump is basically giving away the game, when the right has gotten so prominent that it sort of gives away the game, guys like Sam Harris, they're sort of stuck. They're neither here nor there. Mm-hmm. But when a Democrat gets back into the presidency, if one does, Democrats control the government, then there is more room for these people to the nuanced takes that are really, really on a continuum with the right wing. They come back into favor because then they also get, to a certain extent, there's there's going to be critique of Biden from the left, and their critique can sort of sneak in a little bit as like a nuanced critique, which is why they all start with like, listen, I'm of the left. It's just that my critique is not.
You hear that, everyone? You got to vote for the Democrats so that Sam's got libertarians to debate.
If that's the one that will drag you across the line, please.
You really think they're going to come back from being Nazis, though? I feel like there's a certain line that once you cross, it's hard to come back from that.
It's not going to be the same people. It's going to be it's the people who pump the money into it. That's all. It's going to be a different generation. Kamala Harrison, here comes the sundown. And I say it's all right. I'm not sure. The sundown. Okay. Canadian hero. There are a few leftists who say they want their vote to make Biden lose because they believe it will be easier to get a leftist in 2024. Yes. I mean, it was exactly what we were told in 2016.
Yeah, that worked out real well.
No, I mean, we're effed no matter what, guys. Don't get it twisted. No outcome in this general election that's coming up will help the left in any way, shape, or form.
But it's all relative. Like the same with Hillary Clinton. Like the fact of the matter remains that if Hillary was president these 4 years, corporations would have maybe $1 trillion less to slosh around than they do right now. Like just that level of material difference is important.
I mean, there's a whole raft of things that also you would have like, the argument that you cannot critique the establishment of the Democratic Party, the entire sort of argument about like, because you're jeopardizing people's lives, et cetera, would be moot.
Right.
That Clinton would have to own where, what their positions are rather than to be, I mean, I can assure you that when you start to see some of these people who've been very vocal about policies they don't like, tack back to what? Well, it's very difficult to change them and blah, blah, blah. Then you can start getting some actual critique that lands.
Bernie got blown out because of the I want to go back to brunch vote. I don't know how this isn't just obvious to people.
That's not the only reason.
This is amazing.
It's a pretty big reason.
These people all said in 2016, we're going to teach Democrats a lesson. They don't learn. They're going to learn the lesson. The people who are not learning the lesson are the people who are making the exact same argument they did 4 years ago and were completely wrong. It was very predictable that there would be a safe vote because we saw it after Reagan, we saw it after Bush, and we're going to see it after Trump. There is a flight to like mediocrity and lack of challenge that if you even look at like just how revolutions happen in general, it is when there's actually a little more space that people start to take more.
That's not always true, but sometimes.
In general, I would say more often than not, when there's a little bit of loosening by the dictator, as it were, people take more space. They take more. They want more. A little bit of taste of this drives it more.
The October Revolution started out with bread riots, but I think the general point is there is an argument to be made that a Biden administration would be better for the left than a Trump administration. I don't really buy it. But there's no argument to be made that Trump would be better for the left than Biden.
What does better for the left mean?
Helps us to build out a mass base for a working class organization.
Those are two different things.
Capital.
So you're saying it's an acceleration. I mean, it's an acceleration, right? Like
no,
he accelerates.
They're both the accelerationist option because neoliberal capitalism is in crisis, and that's.
But better isn't helping. Relatively doesn't mean he's helping. Like I don't think Biden's going to help the left. That doesn't make. Right. I don't think there's any argument that he's not relatively better than Trump is. I mean, I just think like the Stephen Miller having official authority. Like there's not an argument about this.
I actually think both.
Those are two different things.
I think actually both. I think Joe Biden is better for the issue sets than Donald Trump is for the left. And the issue sets, I'm including like less human immiseration. And then I also think in terms of like institutionally, I think Joe Biden is a better foil for the left than Donald Trump is.
Mm-hmm.
Because Donald Trump being the foil, you get thrown in with a lot of people. Because there's a lot of people who are against Donald Trump. When you have a Democrat in office, particularly one where there is no sort of like illusions going into it, right? There isn't going to be the 2 years of honeymoon that Barack Obama got. I think it's going to be. I think as a foil, I think the left is going to do much better.
It certainly seems possible, but raising awareness and spreading critiques, as we know, isn't necessarily enough to build power. Like, as evidenced by all the people who say they support Medicare for all but voted for Biden anyway. Like, it's going to take more than that to really politicize people and engage them in creating a better world and in believing that it's possible.
I mean, if there's something to the left's program, they should be able to proselytize that equally well. But in terms of actual power, you want the power that AOC is going to have. Let's just say, for instance, in a government where legislation that passes the House can be signed into law is different than when you're just like going up against nothing. Right? I mean, that's the reality. There's nothing that can come out of the House that's going to get signed by the president. When everyone knows that that is the case, that what the House passes is relevant, that's where the power starts to grow. If the power can grow, that's where it grows. The rest of this stuff is meaningless. It's just posturing.
The
now
idea
you get to hear, like you get to see, like, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Honestly, like the focus on how you can get power in the future and not like what's happening right now. It seems like, oh, we'll just think about what our draft pick is going to be like in 2 years. Like, I don't know.
Well, we got to be planning out in many years at a time if we ever want to do the thing.
But we also have to understand like who's controlling the government and enacting power in their policy. And like that's Stephen Miller for this entire 4 years. Like it's just not hard for me to say like a slightly less bad administration is going to be better than this one.
Look, I also think that saying, X or Y is going to sort of like, we have our 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and it involves the immiseration of a lot of people that we want as part of our coalition. Like that's not a great plan.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Well,
look, we're talking about two separate things. I'm willing to concede the point that there would probably be some marginal short-term benefits for people under a Biden mid versus a Trump admin. I'm not interested in arguing that point. I'm just saying it remains to be seen if there would actually be any benefit for the left and for leftist organizing. And I'm skeptical of that.
I mean, like I say, if the left can't organize under Biden, the problem is greater than Biden or Trump.
Yeah.
No, I mean, our job is the same, no matter who's president. We got to do it.
I mean, I have confidence in the left because of what the left did under Obama. And exactly. I think that basically set up Bernie for what we all understand as Bernie's contribution now.
Exactly.
And it's going to be hard to compare. I guess we could compare, the first 4 years of Trump to, these next 4 years of Biden, although the historical conditions are going to be somewhat different and they're changing every day.
Of course.
We're living in an accelerationist timeline. But
that's the problem with every comparison is that we don't have an alternate universe and, everything is different. And yes, we have a different age cohort and whatnot. But I could say this, that I think if Bernie Sanders had entered the race 6 months before he did in 2016, he would have been the nominee. And I think it's like an indication of your best opportunities come in when the stakes of attempting to the stakes to aspire to something better are perceived as lower.
You might be right. I don't know. I'm agnostic about a lot of this stuff, but bottom line, the left has to keep on fighting no matter what and never give up for a second. Keep on growing. Keep on being in the streets.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. I just think that like just human nature, I think, is loss averse. And people are afraid from going from the frying pan to the fire. And if there is no sense that there's a danger of falling into the fire, then you have more of an opportunity to jump out of the frying pan to, I don't know. I have no, whatever, to
safety,
to the plate. I don't know.
I mean, Lula in Brazil had more room to operate when the middle class was less afraid of him. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We shall see.
10 lawn gnomes. 10 lawn gnomes. Any leftist personal finance gurus? Dave Ramsey certainly knows his stuff, but it'd be nice to get solid advice from without the biblical subtext. Well, I'm not convinced that Dave Ramsey knows his stuff. Dave Ramsey just sort of like, moralizes as to as to what you should be doing with debt. His is more sort of like almost like a Jordan Peterson. I think there is, I don't know if there's any leftist finance gurus, because really on some level you don't want to get there. I mean, Hedwood knows how to play the market.
Oh yeah. Marxist economists understand the economy better than anyone, I think.
But that's not necessarily personal finance. Is sort of like, stock market-y maybe type of stuff. I don't know. Northern California, especially Shasta County, is super racist. People fly on the Confederate flag there often. Trump even made a campaign stop. I think Redding, where he called out his black supporter in the crowd. Mailman. Hi, Sam. I'm Mailman, Western New York last week. Oh, yeah, you told me that already. Dispaz. Sam, you may not realize this, but with just a passing comment on your ad read, you may have put a bad, massive point of contention among the left, which is a hotly debated for years. Why would anyone want Chicago deep dish? I mean, is it even a pizza? I agree. Joyce from Tampa, wish you guys were not so cozy with sexist like Chapo Trap House. I don't know what you mean by cozy, or I'm not sure that I would call them sexist.
I'm a bit of a feminazi, and I do not find them sexist, but maybe I'm just saying that for clout. I don't know.
Crass rebuttal. This post office thing made me think of what happens right after the election. Oh, yeah, it's the holiday season. So after years of rhetoric about a war on Christmas, Trump actually, people really. Zephi, haven't seen anyone talk about the reactions to Alex Moore's story being an example of cancel culture, but it seems to follow the ContraPoints model. People removed the vague and thin allegations, started talking in abstraction, not waiting for a smoking gun is evidence of deception. Okay, I will say this right now. The characterizing this Alex Morse thing as cancel culture is ridiculous, because this was a concerted smear job that is done in politics, and people used the tools that were available to them to do it. And in fact, the whole thing is unraveled. Yes. Do people on social media react to things because they don't read into it at all? Yes, that happens. People are lazy.
Out of a good faith effort to tend to believe the accuser over the accused in any given scenario.
There was no accuser.
Yeah, there was. It satisfied the criteria for a lot of people.
Well, that was a mistake. There was no accuser. This is the same thing that happened to Taibbi.
Like a lot of the time, people want to be anonymous because they don't feel safe or whatever, and I still don't really know the answer.
Well, it's not like any of these accusers went to any type of authority. Going to the head of the Democratic student chapter and say, I don't want him to come and visit us anymore, when he hadn't been there for months, and there was certainly no plans to do so in the future because there's a pandemic. That is super suspicious. If the person goes to the administration of the school and says it, and there's people there to vet. But this is an organization that wasn't doing any vetting. There was nothing other than just basically an advertisement like, we don't want you to come and visit us anymore. Well, that wasn't happening anyways. So they weren't trying to protect these people. There was no accuser. And there was no one who vetted an accuser. And there were no details about it. It was just several of our members. Why would it come out right now when there's no imminent visit? There hasn't been any visit for almost a year.
Yeah.
So this is just like a campaign smear job.
How the story filtered down to me was the student groups wrote him a letter saying, don't come to our events, you're creeping us out or whatever. Then it leaked somehow. And I was like, you know what? That's fair for students to set a boundary with someone for how they want to interact with him. And then we found out more. And I was like,
people should not
this was
react.
A smear job.
People should not react to things that are filtered down, I think. I mean, it's just, you got to do your due diligence. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, there's three options here, right? There's you believe the accuser is lying until proven they're not, or the groups claiming to speak for anonymous accusers, right? You assume they're lying until they're proven not to be, or you assume that they're not lying until they're proven to be, or you don't believe either side of it.
No, that's my point. In fact, that's absolutely wrong, because it's not, I assume anything. The thing, you don't need to just assume. You can actually evaluate each circumstance based upon the specifics of the circumstance. And like, if Morris was scheduled to go visit the Democratic student Democrats in a week, and they send a letter and say, I'm sorry, we're going to have to rescind. Frankly, there's been some problems. Then I would say, hey, wait a second. There could be something more to this. If it was a private letter that didn't leak, and I don't know that it was, it was put out, then maybe it's a different situation. But with no imminent visit, with no absolute, I mean, and how do you know there was no imminent visit? Because there's a pandemic. I mean, that's a big red flag. If this was a situation where UMass or Amherst or whatever these schools said, we've had complaints come to us and we're dealing with this. My point is, you don't assume anything. You actually read into what the situation is before you make an assessment of it.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I am afraid that enemies of the left will capitalize on our efforts to be sensitive around accusations of boundary crossing, sexual harm, whatever, that they will take advantage of these best practices that are informed by transformative justice and weaponize these accusations against leftist candidates. And maybe there won't be a report from The Intercept next time.
Oh, of course. I mean, of course, they're going to, but I mean, these, it's not just, enemies of the left, leftists. I mean, people will use what they can use and what's available in front of them. And in an era when, I don't know, Mike Cernovich, searching the word rape in my Twitter feed and using that. I mean, people will use this stuff whenever they can. And all that is involved, all you really need ultimately to deal with it is, people need to scrutinize these claims. And when there's a sufficient amount of substantiation, or at the very least, there is look, in this same thing happened with Taibbi. There was no accuser. He was never accused by a person that he did anything to anybody.
No, it was a misunderstanding in which he did himself very few favors.
Yeah, that's true. But the fact is, there was no accuser. And it's like, you cannot even if you subscribe to the idea that I always believe the accuser, you need to have an accuser. Just like if we just base it upon some non-authoritative organization, right? And say that, and they're being completely anonymous. I think it's dangerous regardless of what the topic is.
Well, sometimes accusers want to be anonymous because you see what happens to them when they're not.
I get that.
I don't
but
have a
question,
great answer to this because
I don't understand. Like, what? Let me ask you this: what is the logic of going to the feeling that you're going to have your anonymity protected by multiple student organizations as opposed to going to the administration?
Yeah, well, in this case, it was certainly fishy.
Yeah.
Just talking more generally.
Zach, have you asked Thomas Frank to come on the show? He's a great interview. I'd love to hear to discuss his new book. I didn't realize he had a new book. I mean, I've interviewed him many times. I would love to. We should do that.
Yeah, we had him for Listen Liberal.
Could USPS tampering be an impeachable offense if there was just direct evidence that Trump was involved? I mean, I think you could argue, yeah. I mean, it's in the Constitution. Marxist, Lenin, oh gosh, it's 3:00. All right, folks. Sorry, we don't have time for anything else. Oy, oy, oy.
Time flies when you're talking about cancel culture.
There you go. This show just got canceled. At least for today, anyways. All right, folks. Jamie, Brendan, Matt, good job, guys. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my